Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this special board meeting for selection of our superintendent. Exciting times. I know board members, I don't know about you, but ready to get this thing going and get it moving. So with that, let's do our reading of the district's vision. And I will do that and then introduce Pastor Newsom as well for our invocation. The school district of Manatee County will be an exemplary, student-focused school system that develops lifelong learners to be globally competitive. That's great to start the meeting there with who we're about to pick the next leader of this district. So with that, I want to call up Mr. Charles Newsom to give us our invocation. If everyone will stand. He's the pastor at Tabernacle of Higher Learning Christian Center. Thanks for doing this. And he's one of our employees in IT services.
Thank you for having me this morning. Let us bow our heads, please. Father God, we thank you for grace and mercy, for waking us up this morning. We're so grateful for this beautiful day that you've allowed us to partake in, this beautiful Tuesday morning. Lord, we're thankful for this monumental occasion, which is the selection of the school district of Manatee County's new superintendent. Lord, I lift up our school board leaders individually and collectively as they have been diligent during this challenging selection process to find 3 worthy candidates from which they must select one as the new superintendent. Lord, give them the wisdom and insight that they need as they make this difficult decision. Lord, we also like to thank you for our illustrious leader, Superintendent Cynthia Saunders, who has decided to step away after 30 plus years as an educator, of which she has been ours for the last 5 years. She is a champion for all regarding fairness and equality, and we are eternally grateful for her dedication, compassion, and commitment to the students and staff of the school district. And I pray for many blessings for her family and all of her future endeavors. Lord, we are all praying this morning that your will is done and that the best candidate will be selected to lead this district to higher heights than we have ever achieved. Again, Lord, we are eternally grateful for what you have done for us, what you continue to do for us, and we are especially excited for where you're going to take us with our new leader. Lord, we give you praise and glory, for you are worthy. And it's in your powerful name, Lord Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. And if you'll recite the Pledge of Allegiance with me.
I pledge allegiance
Yeah, I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Mary.
A little bit on your mind.
We want to move to item number 5 in the agenda, which is approval of the agenda. Obviously, not much on it, so
So moved.
got a motion.
Motion.
I'll second.
We have a second. Any discussion on the agenda? I know we will have discussions about the agenda, but not this minute. All right, let's go ahead and vote on approval of the agenda. And that passes 5-0. Moving us to item number 6, public comment. We do have 2, any more come in, Laura? Nope. We do have 2 public comments signed up. First one is Mr. Jack May, and second one is Charlie Kennedy.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Jack May. I am the president of an organization called Manatee Patriots and a Manatee County resident. I do have a question. In the past, leaders of organizations have been given 5 minutes to speak, and has that rule been abated or abandoned?
It's no longer.
No longer? No longer.
No longer.
Yeah.
We'll call that an abandonment, okay. Therefore, I request 3 minutes, and the clock can start now. I had questions. I was wondering if
You
we
can restart them at 3 minutes. That's fine.
Okay, great. First of all, I want to congratulate you all for the tenacity to spend the money, the time, and all the other resources in the district's hunt for a new administrator. You guys have obviously agonized over a lot of stuff for a long period of time, and we appreciate that. My organization appreciates that. We kind of drilled down and looked at candidates. We even selected a candidate in our poll initially, and that candidate was Mr. Schneider. Now, one of the things that came to mind was the fact that, as is in so many selection processes, we end up where we narrow our focus just with the people that we are going to select from the pool, and it's down to 3 people. And oftentimes, we spend our time actually in a comparison mode saying, okay, I'm going to compare this guy to this guy, this lady to this guy to this lady. And sometimes we fail to actually drill down on the candidates themselves past that comparison. Like I say, it dawned on me that we may be, and I'm a leadership guy. I think everything rises and falls on leadership in every organization. So as we looked, and as I looked at the backgrounds as to who they are and what type of leadership skills that they possess, I hope you know that I think that's a component that's probably as important as all the other components to that person's resume. I would much rather have a great leader who is smart enough to learn the job than to have a poor leader who knows all the things and has all the skill sets. I also took the opportunity, and I wish I had done this sooner rather than later, because I think our poll results would have been different. I've had the opportunity to talk with some folks in the administrative section of Duval County. I've had the opportunity to talk with some Duval County board members, and it's kind of amazed me that the responses were completely different. On the administrative side, they say, yeah, he's a great guy, loves all the kids, does all the stuff, good guy, wonderful. And then when I talked to the board, I got an entirely different picture. One of the things that, just want to give you a quick analogy, is when all of us, throughout our years as we grow, we take on baggage. And it's baggage, could be good baggage, could be bad baggage, but it's kind of like a piece of meat, you know? You got a great piece of steak, and you decide to, is it over?
Finish the analogy of steak because I like steak.
Okay. Is that you dip it in the marinade. And depending upon how long it's in the marinade is going to be how long or what the final taste of that piece of meat is going to be. I fear that we have a candidate here that has been in the marinade through 2 administrative superintendents and has gathered some of the things that they bring to the party, which is now under investigation. And I would hate to see us choose someone who eventually is going to be under investigation, and we have to back out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Charlie Kennedy.
Good morning, old friends. How's everybody? It's good to see everybody. Mr. Dye, Dr. Vogel, Ms. Messina. Very good. Good to see you both. The first thing I want to do is thank the board and FSBA for the process you've embarked on. The public has had multiple opportunities to engage the candidates, to engage you. I haven't seen every minute of it, but the parts that I have seen, there have been good questions. I feel like you've gotten it down to what looks like to me, and apparently to you too, is your 3 best candidates. I want to take a slightly different perspective, and I'm offering this not in my former role, but really as a person who's now back inside the district. And you know, conversations that I've had, I can't speak for everybody, but I can speak to the conversations that I've had. And one other piece of this that's kind of funny is my nephew is here with me today because he was outside of this. He's not even here with me because of this, but he's basically shadowing me today at work. And so today at work, I came to speak to the school board, and so he came with me. And Michael will be a freshman at Manatee High School in August. So I'm really excited for him to see this, and it's in that light of what Micah's next 4 years are going to look like. And as you all know very well, this is the biggest decision you all make. And I just want to approach this in a sensitive way, but I think I just came today because I feel like it needs to be said. And that you've gone through a very good process, a very transparent, open process, that you've taken your time. But if there is any hesitation in making a choice today, I think it's okay to wait. If, on the other hand, if you are 100% and you know who you want, I hope that person is Doug Wagner. Because if it were me and I had to choose today, it would be Doug. Just speaking for myself is, but if you're not 100%, there's nothing wrong with taking your time, resetting, taking another good look at this. I'm sure you get a lot of some of the same candidates will be back. Maybe you'll get some new ones if the search opens up again. But I just wanted to offer that as a possibility. And, you know, this is what you're here for. This is what you signed up for. The hard decisions that are made in public, hard conversations that have to be had in public. And I hope you don't feel like you have to make it today if you are not ready. So please, for Micah's sake, for this district's sake, if it takes more time, that's okay. Take your time. And I wish you all the best. Have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So, moves us to our only agenda item for the day, which is item number 7, board discussion with FSBA regarding superintendent search and then the potential selection of a new superintendent. So, want to just go ahead and read. I know board members, you received this, but want to go ahead and read this and make sure the public knows kind of how the process and how we'll go through the remainder of the agenda. We've already heard from public comment. I would like to do a round discussion of first go round from the board members of just overall process, maybe overall thoughts of how everything worked out. I don't want to necessarily get into detail about a decision of candidate yet. I just would like to go over overall views. We can do that by requesting to sign. Hopefully everybody's on Granicus. And if not, I'll be the bad guy and pick on Gina. Then once we get there, we don't need to elaborate too much on everything, about 5 minutes each. Once we get to that first round, then we can jump into whoever would like to start about the candidates and moving forward with that. So if there is a potential selection, I would like to, at that point, call a recess, call that person, and let them know that we've decided on them. Are they still wanting the position? And then we'll go from there and talk about potentially any negotiations for a contract. So with that, I do want to read this and make sure everybody knows kind of what we've gone from, back in several months ago, how we've moved forward to this point. So as we address our new selection of the new superintendent, this school board will make a decision of great magnitude. Our decision today will have a direct impact, of course, on the continued success of Manatee County Public Schools. We have an elected duty to represent the public. More importantly, our decision will impact the lives and education of over 52,000 young people and 6,000 employees. With that in mind, I do want us to make sure, we have an open and candid discussion. This is obviously, as we know, an extremely important decision. I've talked about the 3 steps. We want to review the process. We'll get in a little bit and then discuss about each candidate and where each board member is what their thought process is. But just going back in time here, in late October, of course, Superintendent Cynthia Saunders announced her retirement. In early January, the school board met during a workshop with FSBA as their search consultants. We discussed the timeline. We also picked some activities to do with our board members as they go to semifinalists and finalists. We held about 4 other workshops over that time from January to April. We discussed all of these superintendent candidates and all the search activities. An online community survey was conducted from January 30th through February 24th that resulted in over 1,600 responses. Remember that survey was us as a board asking you all, what do you want in a superintendent? What are the characteristics that you're looking for in the community? After we gathered that, we came up and compiled from that list as well. We held 4 community forums, 3 staff focused groups. We did that for the 15th to the 23rd of February, where we had several hundred people come in and give us their ideas of what a candidate looks like and what some of those characteristics were as well. We advertised this superintendent position for 30 days, March 10th through April 10th. As a board, we decided we wanted a nationwide search. We put it out everywhere. I don't think there was one list that we said no to. Matter of fact, we received, is that right? I think that's correct. We listed it everywhere. 27 applications were received. 11 semifinalists were named on April 12th. 1 semifinalist withdrew from consideration. Each of the remaining semifinalists then answered written questions that we came up with as a board. Also did a video questions and responded to that we came up with as a board. We then went to a workshop and chose 3 finalists that were interviewed this past week on May 10th and 11th. First interviews by the full board as a whole, which was recorded and was on our website and still could be probably looked at right now under the superintendent search. And then we did individual one-on-ones that were private interviews with the candidates as well for each board member. That night, the community meet and greet had about 60 to 70, I want to say, participants at that got to meet the 3 candidates. The 3 candidates got to give a little 5-minute presentation on themselves, and then they're broken apart the room. People were able to ask questions individually for those superintendent finalists and the candidates. And then we received input based on a survey. We did a QR code. We did online surveys that you could pick which candidate. You could also pick and tell us what you liked and what you didn't like. I'm sure as board members, we also got calls, emails, and opinions from everybody that maybe we wanted to, or maybe we even reached out to folks that maybe went to the meet and greet and asked them what their opinion was. So with that being said, I'd like to start, and we have Granicus up, so if you want to go first, great. But I want to start our first round with the process. No more than 5 minutes. Can we get a 5-minute clock up there just so we can time ourselves? Sometimes up here we'll ramble. Led Zeppelin's it's a good song, Ramble On, but that's like a 7-minute song, and that's too much time. So seeing nobody clicking to speak, I'll begin, and then I'll pick on Miss Messenger, excuse me. I thought, to be honest, the first process that I've ever been a part of course, as a board member, but even as a teacher. I was not teaching the last time we did a search, and so really, you all did not, when I say you all, FSBA was phenomenal. There was not one time where I thought, this isn't what we hired you for. You're dropping the ball, right? You guys did a fantastic job. I mean, whenever I wanted to call and talk to anybody from FSBA, I did. Maybe too late or too early for Dr. Vogel sometimes, but hey, he answered it and was polite and was great about it. So from a consultant standpoint, who we chose, don't think we could have chosen anybody better. There's really keep doing what you're doing, because I thought it was fantastic the way you ran from what I heard from the meet and greet, but also the day of the interviews. There was never any, flaw from the candidates going and doing their visits at schools to when they were supposed to be here, to even the one-on-one interviews. You all were walking them around. It was very, very professional, and we appreciate that. You guys did a fantastic job for us. Whatever the decision today, you all did what you were supposed to do. You delivered. So I appreciate that very much. To all the candidates, all 27 of them, I want to say thank you for applying. It takes a lot of guts and a lot of courage to step out and say, I want to be the leader of something. And so even though we narrowed it down to 3, there was 27 original applicants. So I want to say thank you to all 27 for having an interest in Manatee County. a county that I believe is the best in the state and in the country. I may be a little bit biased, but I do truly believe that. And I think that our district is prepared to go on to great things. And to the semifinalists, thank you as well for the work that you did, turning in the videos, writing the written responses. I know that can be, added work if you don't know if you're going to get it or not. So thank you to them. And then to our 3 finalists, Mr. Schneider, Dr. Weissong, and Mr. Wagner. All 3, did a good job with interviews. Never once in the one-on-ones were personal. They're prepared for the interviews. They had their 100-day rollout plans, presented us things. I mean, it was very, very, all 3 were very professional. And really, I couldn't have asked for any more professionalism and preparedness from 3 candidates. Now, granted, we didn't see anybody else, but for them for sure, I thought that they all 3 were prepared and ready to present their ideas and where they could take Manatee County Schools. I think we've got a tough decision on many fronts today. I think that this decision, although we'd like to have a 5-minute meeting and put this gavel and we got somebody, we've got a discussion to have, and I'm excited. I'm excited to see where the other board members' thoughts are and ideas of who would be the next best candidate to take the district forward. So I'm excited to move forward and really be able to start talking with you all now, who were the decision makers. And we said this from the beginning, the buck stops here. We're the ones that have to make this decision. FSBA delivered, the community delivered with the responses, and now we got to be one to make the decision. So with that, I got 20 seconds left, so I'm going to give that up so everybody has 20 seconds back. Anybody wants to go first? Then I'll start with
I'll go.
Ms. Spray.
I'll go. I'll be the brave
lucky.
soul. I want to echo a lot of the sentiment that Chair Choate just said. The process, I was like, okay, how is this all going to work? But it was almost seamless from the process of getting FSBA to start it, getting applicants, advertising for us, processing applicants, giving us the best information they possibly could. However, I'm not one of those who will run to you for every answer, but I have called and tried to get feedback, and I was very satisfied with the direction they've given me. I think the interview process was very structured. I hope that everyone that came before us in this room felt very welcomed. I know our community made them feel very welcome from my one-on-one. And I think that there are, when I did attend the community meet and greet, and I was able to see how each one of them interacted. There was community leaders there, there was staff there, and you could see that they were engaged. They wanted to hear from not only the leaders and the staff, they wanted to hear from just community members. Just a normal person coming in, I want to be a part of this process. And that was very telling to me. Having the room structured the way it was ideal, I think. People would shift from one table to the other to the other. However, we had to do this in stages, and I left, and outside the room, I was met with people saying what their opinions were of each candidate. And two, we all, I'm sure, I know I have had conversations with other people in the county, out the county, in the state. If that tells you, I have done my due diligence. And I appreciate Mr. Kennedy saying if you're not 100% certain, take more time. So I felt that we went through a great process. I think that we've gathered all the information we possibly could on each one of these candidates. I think that we've done, our role is to, now I've thought about this on my perspective as a board, we make this decision, but this one decision affects so many lives. It's the career of the applicant. It's the district vision that we just read. It's so many more things. So I've taken this decision very heavily, and the stress I have been under, and it's a hard decision. I can't imagine the stress some of the staff has had to go through while they're waiting for us to make this choice. So I think that it's been a great process. I want to thank FSBA for all of their work in this process, and I watched other meetings that they conducted across all, and again, we had how many applicants and how many counties were even looking, how many other districts are looking. So there's been a lot going on in the state and in the education field. So I feel like I am where I am in my heart. I'm glad we have an invocation today because I have prayed about this many, many days. So with that, that's all I have to say, and I will yield to the next.
Very much. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Manatee County, the Chamber of Commerce, for their help with the tours. Jackie and her staff were fantastic with riding along with the staff from Manatee County and explaining to the candidates what's going on in Manatee County as far as the commerce and business and the growth that we're having. So, again, thank them and the chamber. Ms. Messenger, would you like to go first? I like going left to right.
That's fine. A lot of what you guys have said about FSBA, I agree with. I really appreciate it. I really feel like the search was transparent. I felt like it was well planned. So I really appreciate all of that. And I don't think I could have said it any better than what you guys have already said when it comes to them. I really appreciate all the feedback that we've gotten from the community. Like you said, we've heard from people all over, and I really appreciate that because it's not just our perception, but the community's perception that's important. So I think there's value in that, and I agree with you on that, and I really appreciate all that FSBA did to garner that. I've said this before, but this is a decision on behalf of the community, but it's for the students of the school district of Manatee County. And I just want to point out that who we're picking today is a CEO of a $1 billion business. That's what this is. This person's going to be our CEO. And, when we first set out, I kind of made a list of, okay, what things are most important to me in our next CEO, because that's what the superintendent is. It's not a figurehead position. It's the CEO. And so, that really weighed into my decisions and my thoughts. And one more thing before we go around to our next round of discussions, and I just want to point this out, and Mr. Kennedy was there for this because Mr. Kennedy voted the same way I did. But when we picked our current superintendent, he and I were the no votes for her initial approval of her contract. And I had my own reasons for that. I've never stated them publicly. It doesn't need to be stated publicly. And I don't think he ever did either. So I don't even know if you had the same thoughts as me. But my point in telling you that is that even though I didn't vote for her, I supported her because that was the decision of this board. Because that is what happens here. This is a board decision. This is not a one me decision. This is not a you decision. This is a board decision. And whether it's your number one choice or your number two choice or your number three choice, whomever it is, we all have to get behind that person so that they can be successful for the students of Manatee County. And I think that this board did that with our current superintendent, and we've seen improvements in education, improvements in budgeting and finance, and it's improvements in opportunities for our students, and it's because this board got behind our superintendent. And so whomever's chosen today, it's all of us that have to get behind and say, no, that is our superintendent. That's not your superintendent. That's our superintendent, and we will support that person. We want them to be successful. So I just want to reiterate that's to me, that's very important. I don't, we haven't gotten a chance to talk about how we feel or opinions about any of this. So I walk into this blind just like you. You can spend as much time as you want reading things and watching things and talking to people, but until you're talking to the other people sitting up here, it's really hard to know where we're going to go. But I do know that I'm going to walk out of here knowing that whomever it is, they're my superintendent, they're our superintendent, and I'm going to do everything I can to support them. And I hope that we can all say that no matter who's chosen. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Foreman?
I do want to say kudos to the FSBA. I mean, it could not have been smoother. You could not have been more accommodating. It was so transparent that I have received nothing but compliments about the process and how we're doing. And I can tell you, having in my other life, I watch other school board meetings, and some of them, those who did not go with FSBA, I think they're going to regret it if they don't already. There's just night and day, the difference between the process here. So I highly recommend any school board to go with FSBA. When I've been in the sidelines and before I was here, and we always said we'd want a national search. And so I had to ask myself, was this a national search? And because most of our applicants were from the state of Florida. And I think that as Ms. Messina pointed out, that advertising, because of the internet, it's going to be a national search. We're going to draw national inquiries. Now, whether they want to come to Florida, especially in the current culture, could be, for education, could be problematic. Also, the fact that in Florida, if you do apply here, unlike other states, your name is out there right away. And I think this needs to be on our next legislative platform. I know this is music to your ears, Mr. Tatum, but this is the only thing that I really strongly believe that we've got it wrong in Sunshine, So, but I think we could have drawn many more candidates if we had it out of the Sunshine, come to our 5 finalists, and then go in the Sunshine, something like that in that process. So, but that's for another day. One of the things about FSBA is they recruit. They go to they know the people in the state of Florida, and they can go and they do say, hey, why don't you consider applying here? This might be a good fit for you. You can't get that from a national search firm. And so once again, I say we chose very wisely. It was a good decision to have FSBA. The process of doing this out in the public is awkward, okay, at this point, because we are going to be talking about people, what we liked, what we didn't like, their skills, their weaknesses, and I'm not comfortable doing that. I will, but before we take that step or start that process and discuss these things in public, I would ask that we consider, as a board, do we want to do that? Do we want to bring in an interim, not select any of these 3 candidates at this time, or whatever our own reasons are? But why put people through this if we're not going to walk out of here with a selection? So, I would like to make a motion.
I think Mr. Tatum should be allowed to.
Yeah,
speak
I would.
first.
You're right. Yeah, I would like to hear from
Yeah.
Mr. Tatum first on the overall process. And then once we jump to the next round, bam,
Pay 'em.
motion can happen.
Gotcha.
Were you finished, Ms. Foreman?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Yes, I was. Yes, I was. I do think that we need to consider, do we want to extend the search? Are we satisfied? I love this district and am very concerned for our students, for our staff, for our employees. And I don't want to make do, okay? We need to bring in the best. And that will involve someone with leadership, with insight, with communication. It needs the whole package. And so I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Chater?
So I won't repeat a lot of what you all have said in the interest of time, but the FSBA did a great job. I was real pleased with the process. And then for the community members, whether it was the chamber, whether it was people that came for public comment, the phone calls and stuff I received attending the events that we had, it was good to see all of the community input that we had. People are interested, obviously, in the process. So since we're just talking about the process right now, the one thing that I will add, and it kind of goes to Ms. Foreman's point is, and it goes to Mr. Kennedy's point too, is the idea of being 100% about anything in life, especially when it comes to human beings, is a difficult place to be. And even for those of us who are married, you know, we probably stood on that altar and said, I am 100% sure that this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. And then a year and a half later, you're like, wow, I didn't know that about you. Right? But we're still married. So that's a difficult place to be. I have thought through the same concerns that Ms. Foreman has, and about what it would look like to extend the process or to, well, I'm just not in favor of that. I guess you're going to make a motion and we can have a discussion about that. But you know, at some point you have to make a decision. I think it was actually Colin Powell said sometimes you have to make decisions and you only have 80% of the information that you need. I wish I could have, for lack of a better term, dated these guys a little longer. I've kind of dated Mr. Wagner. You know, he works here in the building with us, and I'd like to get to know these gentlemen better, but those opportunities, whether we started the whole process over, we're still going to have interviews and public interviews and the same process. So I'll just leave it at that. I'll yield my time. I really don't have a lot more to say on the process, and so I'm done with my comments on the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura, my Granicus is not showing, has any board members clicked to say you wanted to talk?
No, but it keeps
going in and out.
I have.
Yeah.
I've been adding them so that I can just
Oh, okay.
I put a timer on them.
Okay, perfect. So we don't need a timer anymore. Because I'd rather be able to take a request seeing the board members click, because right now it's kind of going off and on. And that way we can use that. Did you have a question? Did you have a question, Ms.
Not
Gray,
a
or was that it?
question,
Was that it about Granicus?
I'm just ready to talk.
Yeah, we're going to move to that. So, Ms. Foreman, jumping out first with the motion. So go ahead. I would like to entertain a motion to get some kind of discussion going, and we can see where it goes from there.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I move that we direct FSBA to republish the ad and extend the due date of the applications to May 31.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to push the application back to, you said,
May 31.
May 31.
2 more weeks.
So 2 more weeks. We have a motion. Do we have a second on that motion?
Motion fails.
I'm going to say yes. I'll second it because I want a discussion. I'd like to get what you're more about it. And then we'll vote and we can vote it down just like we would have right there with the motion. But I'd like to now go to and see what your thoughts were. So have a discussion about the motion now.
Okay, my thoughts. I don't even know that 2 weeks is sufficient. I'm not even sure that this would be the way to go to extend the deadline, as opposed to bring in an interim, for a period of time, 6 months, a year, whatever. I'm not satisfied that I have not determined, I do not have confidence in any of the candidates to to accomplish, and what we can talk about that. It's just I wanted to discuss this before we get to that point.
Okay.
That by bringing someone in, or extending the date, I don't care which way we go, there were people who did not apply because we had an internal candidate. That slows the process down, even though, in all fairness, and I thank you to Mr. Wagner, he applied at the last minute, but I think word was out that we had an internal candidate. And we had a qualified person out of state that withdrew because of, my understanding is because of some talk that we had among the board that we wanted somebody who knew Florida. So I think in some ways we have shot ourselves in the foot. I don't have, I'm not 100%, I'm not 80%, okay? And as Ms. Messenger said, I will support whomever the board chooses. I think I've proved that in the past. When I first came on the board, I voted against Ms. Saunders' contract being renewed. But in the end, I did vote for it because a superintendent will not be effective if we all don't support him or her. These are tough times bringing in a superintendent. There are so many openings. There's so much competition. There are we've got a lot of openings in the state of Florida where superintendents are being appointed, and frankly, I think in a couple of years we could see those positions open right back up. I think FSBA has a little cottage industry for life, you know.
Prefer not to.
But if we, rather than jump in the middle of the fray, if we sit back, let the dust settle, and find someone who can, maybe I should have changed the motion, you know, because I think I'm talking more about an interim than I am about extending the deadline. But perhaps by extending the deadline for more applications, some people who were reluctant before, some people that we have heard might have had an interest, you know, as an interim that we can contact. So I just want that discussion before we start talking about people.
Okay. Since I don't see anybody click to speak, so since I seconded,
But I'll wait till you're done.
you did or did not?
I am clicked. It's okay.
Yeah, I don't
I think we're all.
I don't see it on my Granicus. So it just says request to speak, like I'm gonna request. So it's not like that I'm the chair, like running it. Anyways, it's okay. So since I second, there you go. Perfect. Thank you. Now I see. So since I seconded the motion, I second the motion based on to get the discussions going, right? I do think an amendment to your motion, I would be in much more favor of voting because I think that we're pigeonholing ourselves to the 31st. Okay. But the discussion on do we wait and not make the decision today, X amount of days, months, whatever, is a valid discussion, right? And that's basically what you're trying to do right now. You're saying, is this the day to make the decision? We had a public comment say the same thing. Is this the day to make the decision? We know we have a contracted superintendent till June 30th. So it's not like tomorrow this position is open, vacated, let's say. So I think it's a valid discussion on for the board to have if we're ready for that, or if a an interim is something that we would want to look into. But I don't know if it is right now because we haven't even heard from everybody yet on anybody's opinion yet. But I do think that that's part of the discussion because I agree with you. I'm not 100%, 80%. There's still question marks to me. So I think that it's valid for us to have the discussion. I just don't know if the motion should move to this before we even have anybody talk about the actual candidates yet and their thoughts. I think we should. That should be part of the discussion. Is an interim a possibility? But I'd like to hear from everybody else as well.
Okay.
So
Well, I appreciate
this-
that, and,
Yeah.
and I just want to say, the reason I brought it now is because I am a coward and don't want to discuss the people at the end, so,
I gotcha.
yeah. So.
Ms. Spray, you were lit up.
Okay. Think long, think wrong, they've told me in the past. And I've thought long and hard about this. And I appreciate Mr. Kennedy saying, if you're not 100% sure, don't make the choice. What I am 100% sure of, I don't feel that one of these candidates, applicants, checked all the boxes for me. This one had strengths here, the other one had strengths there, and the other one had local. So I'm just saying it. I won't be so much of a coward maybe, but I think they all have value. They bring value to the district, but is it the whole package? No, I don't think so. There are qualities that one would have, the other didn't. And if I could take a little bit of all three, maybe and create a superintendent, that might be the thing. But I couldn't find the financial background. That is my biggest thing. You just, as Ms. Messenger said, $1 billion CEO, CFO. I didn't see that. I did not feel that with anyone, even on the interviews here or the one-on-ones. Is there issues with one over the other? This district has been through so much for the last 12, 14 years with things that were preventable, in my opinion, but it still happened. And I'm just not willing to take the district down a road with a dark cloud over it. That's where I feel. I'm supportive of not actually doing, I don't think we need to extend a search and do new applicants or do anything like that. It would be my opinion that we bring in an interim for a year. That's where I am. And again, we did do a national search. We had people withdraw for some reason or another. And then too, it looks, if you look at the survey results, it's very slanted to the interim candidate. It's gonna be that in any district that is looking. You're always gonna have the local people support the local person. And I said that to the other two applicants. You know, it was all anonymous surveys. It was all anonymous numbers. So somebody from their district could have put in, had 50 of their people, you know, put in, oh, great person. But they didn't do that, from what I could see. But I went through the whole survey results. I went through every comment as best as I could to make the choice. And I'm not 100% any of these applicants are, in my heart, the best choice for the district. So I would lean toward, let's get an interim. Applicants withdrew because the interim was the internal candidate was viewed to be the favorite. And that was never the case. Everyone gets a fair shot, in my opinion. And with the other commenter, do we want to bring down some more drama? I do not. I just do not want to put the district through that. So, I mean, there's applicants that withdrew, and there was some that I wanted to have that one-on-one with them, and I didn't get that opportunity, and I wish they hadn't withdrawn, whether in-state or out-of-state. But I'm to the mindset of we need to keep looking, and that's where I am. Whether that's in a month, 2 months, we have a June 30th deadline. I don't see why there isn't any reason why we can't bring somebody in for an interim for at least a year. Let the dust settle. That is what I see. Let's let the dust settle. We have so many districts looking, and again, I talked to all of these different districts and why they chose this one, why didn't they do this? And it all came down to what's best for the district. And I don't feel that we're there.
Thank you. Mr. Tatum was that next? Then Ms. Messenger.
I'm collecting my thoughts. This is important, you know, what the words that come out of my mouth.
I hear you.
And I don't want to be like the Led Zeppelin, just rambling on.
Right.
I understand the concerns of not being 100%. The question is then, what's the plan, or is the grass going to be greener on the other side of the fence? We've advertised this. Ms. Messina, would you remind us where we advertised this opening? Just off the top of your head, it doesn't have to be a complete and full list, but.
I know we advertised with the, we have that list real quick. I'm sorry, give me 1 second.
Sure. Why you're pulling that up, my point is that we've advertised it far and wide. And the people that are motivated and interested in becoming a superintendent should have applied. I saw a little message pop up from someone who I know is watching live, and they said, someone who backed out because, oh, I might be an internal candidate, I don't know. I mean, if playing politics to that level shows me that's not the kind of character that I want from somebody. If you want this job, you apply and you come full force and you're motivated. And, well, I'm going to play the politics. As Mr. Wagner, he's an internal candidate. I don't know. I don't know. That doesn't speak to me a lot about somebody's character. We have do we have a list? Yeah, go ahead,
Yes,
please.
American Association of School Administrators, Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents, Education Week, School Top Jobs, Florida Association of School Administrators, National Alliance of Black School Educators, the Broad Center, the FSBA main page, the National Affiliation of Superintendent Searchers, Council of Great City Schools,
Yeah, and on and on and on and on and on. So if we're going to decide that we're not going to decide today, then we have to think, is the grass going to be greener on the other side of the fence? Another thing to think about is, to me, now I guess we could say the same thing a year from now, but the timing right now is very good, is that we're starting a new school year. If this person would shadow for a month during June, they'll walk through the budgeting process with us. To drop somebody in the middle of now if we're going to wait a year, I guess it would be this time next year, but I certainly wouldn't want to drop somebody in the middle of the school year or something like that. Timing right at the beginning of this time right now seems like a good time to have somebody come in and walk through the budgeting process with us and kind of shadow the superintendent who's been here for 5 years and have a really good turnover and a transition. Third consideration is, I'm not quite sure what the term interim legally exactly means. I had, and maybe I could ask Mr. Dye, but I had some discussions with people who are in the know that, I mean, whether you give somebody a year, you're still selecting someone. It's a year-long contract. Whether you give them a 1-year contract and call it an interim, or a 3-year contract and call it a selection, it's still a selection. It's just timing on the contract. And help me understand the consequences. Let's say in a year we decide, well, first of all, in a year, we can just say thank you for your time. It's an at-will employment situation, and we will not have that person as a superintendent, that we just part ways. Is that, I mean, at least from the superintendent position, if we had a one-year contract, is that your understanding of what would happen at the end of a year if we decided not to renew?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay.
It's not a defined term that's generally accepted. I mean, it's kind of, it's still a contract,
Right.
and it may just be a short contract, you know, like a 1 year. But it's probably, I mean, you could see where it would attract someone who says, I'll make the case for myself during that year.
Mm-hmm.
But it may also be people that don't really want longer than that themselves. They want a short gig, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So now if we have a 3-year first of all, we could hire somebody, sign a contract, and based on the terms of the contract, with maybe it's like a 3-2 vote, we could remove them from their position the next day. I mean, we the board with a majority vote, or at least whatever the contract says, whether it's 4-1 or 3-2, we can vote to remove them at any time. Is that correct?
depends on how the contract reads,
Right.
but yeah.
But there'll be some provision in there for, typically,
Yeah.
there's a provision to remove.
Yeah,
So-
I think the current contract is written that way.
And it's written, what, a 3-2 vote or something? Do you know off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my
No,
head.
it's 3, but there is a provision to do that.
Yeah, it's got a pretty quick.
So
kill
let's
on it.
say we did a 3-year contract, and in a year we decide, this marriage isn't working out, so to speak, and we said, we're gonna remove you from your position. Somehow it came up in a conversation I had that we would owe is there a law about 5 months maximum amount of severance you can give to somebody? Are you required to give them that amount of severance, or is it all negotiable in the contract, or?
It's negotiable in the contract.
It's negotiable in the contract. So is there typically a provision in there that says if we terminate you before the end of your contract, you get X number of months, or certain, what are the provisions of the contract typically look like in a typical contract in that type of situation? Termination without cause, the marriage isn't working and we'd like to move on. What are the typical terms of something like that in your experience?
It's, again, it's just negotiable. So it's really up to the parties to negotiate what they would be comfortable with.
Is it typically 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, several months, just so the person has a transition period to move on, or
Yes, not a full year.
not a full year?
Yeah.
A half a year or less?
Yes, and you see the longer sort of packages, that's usually done outside the contract.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's done out, like
Like if you see, yeah,
termination?
if you see someone leave with a really, you know, what they call the golden parachute, or the really lucrative, that's usually a negotiation that's outside their contract. Usually the contract has a shorter period than that, yeah.
Okay. And I would like to make the point that people who accept this job, and if they're an outside candidate, they move here, they bring their family, that's a risk for them too. So if for some reason the marriage isn't working out, to me, I think it's ethical to provide them at least some buffer, so to speak, so that they can move on with their life, especially if they've moved their family here and everything, assuming it was for, without cause, that they didn't really do something unethical or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, typically an interim is more of a local
Right.
person that doesn't relocate their life,
Sure.
yeah.
So there's there's that difference. Well, the point being that there really isn't such a thing as an interim. It's a phrase that we use, but whether it's a 1-year contract or it's a 3-year contract, it's still a selection. It's just how long you can give this person a contract for.
Yeah, I think it's a trial for somebody that might become permanent or full-time, or whatever you want to call it. Or it's to give you more time to look for somebody else.
Sure. And I'd like to address Ms. Spray's concern. I too had some budgeting concerns. I don't want to get into talking, well, I have to, just to address that concern. I spent some time on the phone with Mr. Wysong afterwards, and I asked him the specific question about his budgeting experience. He's currently the deputy running over all of the school system and when I say operations, I mean instruction operations. He is their deputy. He's been in that position for 2 years. He goes to all of the budget meetings. Asked him about, are you familiar with the problems that we had in Manatee County a number of years ago? He said, yes, I am. I followed it closely. It's a very good case study. I feel like I have a good understanding of what went on there. I said, look, we can't have that happen again. And he said, I followed that issue and those problems. I did a leadership case study on it. I'm in all the budgeting meetings now as the deputy, and I go to them. So I do feel that he at least fits that concern, that he does have some experience in the budgeting process, as well as he's familiar with the problems that we've had in the past. So to resume my comments and then to be brief and be gone, as Mr. Mike Ron likes to say when he talks as our county commissioner, I think the timing is right now to pick somebody. I'm not sure that the grass would be greener on the other side of the fence if we keep waiting, because we've advertised this far and wide. And the people who didn't apply because of fears about internal candidates, or put their application in and pulled it out, but then maybe we're thinking about it again, I'm just not sure that person has the right motivation and character for the job. So I'll end my comments there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Messenger,
I agree with every single thing Mr. Tatum just said.
will you clear your name?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I agree with every single thing he just said. Every single one. He said it better than me. And I want to point out something that when we first started this search, I had this made. I don't know if anybody still has it. If you remember. And the point that I was trying to show with this is that the data does not support having a short-term superintendent like an interim. There is no such thing as an interim. You're right. It's superintendent. That is the title. Whether they're a long contract or a short contract, it's superintendent. There is no such thing as an interim. It is superintendent. They might be here for a shorter amount of time. They might have a shorter contract, but they are the superintendent. But the point that I showed with this is what happens when you have multiple people. Grades go down. Students, these are students that are learning less. They are being affected by the decisions made by this board. That was the whole point of this that I had months ago. These are students. These are students. Look at all the people. Here's all the people that they had. Students learning less because of the instability of this district. These are my kids in these schools, and they don't deserve more instability in this district. This is that little boy in our schools. He does not deserve any more instability in this district. No one's perfect, but the grass is not going to be greener on the other side of the fence. Everyone's going to have a weakness. Every single one. And you know what? You know what our job is going to be? To say, oh, that one right here. Okay, I see he's got this weakness. What can I plug in to help with that weakness? I know this weakness exists. No matter who you pick, they're going to have one. What can I plug in? What can I do to support that weakness? Because I know that weakness. And when I asked candidates, when I talked to candidates, my questions were so that I could discern what their weakness is, or if they were even aware of what their weakness was. Because I know they're going to have one. They're going to have one. It's our job to make sure they get the support so they can be successful. That is imperative. So to think that you're going to have somebody that you're 100% sure on, you're not. Like I told you before, I didn't vote for our current superintendent, and I'm going to tell you why. I'll tell you why. I hadn't seen her as a leader. I had seen her under somebody else. That person was the leader. I hadn't seen her be the leader that she has become. We haven't seen that for any of these three. We haven't seen the leader they can become. We can support them to become that leader. But we're going to have to put in those supports to help them. We're going to have to help them figure out what their weaknesses are if they don't know them. They may not know them yet. That's going to happen. They're going to have one. We have to support them through it. And realize even the internal one, you haven't seen who they are as a leader. I can promise you that because I've lived through it. So I don't support having an interim or a shorter term contract or whatever you want to call it, because I think it's going to add more instability to this district. I think students are going to suffer. I think education is going to suffer. I'm not in a rush, but we have set up this timeline so that whomever we choose can work with our current superintendent, can work through the budget process. Like we worked to make this as seamless as possible to help our students. And this would remove that stability that our employees, when I go talk to employees, that's one of the things they need. There is so much instability in education right now through the state of Florida. There is so much instability in what's happening with standards, curriculum, new law changes, everything else. They feel bricks upon bricks on their back of instability coming from lots of different places. And I do not believe our place is to add more. I have told people when they ask me about our choices, I say, I feel like we have good, better, and best. I don't think any of them are bad. I'm prepared to support whomever this board chooses. Do I think they all have weaknesses? Yes. Do I hope we choose the best? Yes. But do I believe we need to make a choice? Also, yes. So that's all I have to say about this.
Any other discussion on the motion on the floor?
May I withdraw it?
You're
Yes,
pretty,
I'd like to withdraw the motion.
okay, then, motion was withdrawn.
Did you withdraw your second?
Yes, I withdraw my second. So now we're back to square one. So discussion I think it was a great discussion though, and that's why I seconded it. I wanted to get discussion going. I think blood's flowing now, so now we can get rocking and rolling. You know what I mean? We do have someone lit to speak, Ms. Spray.
Yeah, okay. I understand all of Ms. Messenger's point, but I still have to go back to, am I 100% with any of these applicants? No. Will I ever be? Probably not. But where I am is I'm 100% sure. I think we need to keep looking. Let the dust settle, like I said before. We had an applicant that was actually, I think Ms. Foreman and Mr. Choate and I reluctantly brought in as a semi, withdrew, and then there was like, why? Why did they withdraw? The writing was on the wall. We're going to bring in the local. So I'm like, wow, okay. To Mr. Tatum's point, if you want the role, fight for it. Well, kind of looked like the deck was stacked against them. And if anybody's curious who I'm talking about applicant number 27. Strong financial background. Knows our district finances. I believe there are things coming our way that needs to be addressed financially. And if we don't have the financials in place, all of those other things are not going to fall into place like they need to be. You're going to have things crashing here, crashing there, not so much, I don't want to paint a bleak picture, but getting the resources from this building down to the students makes a difference. Saving money in this category to that category down to the students makes a difference. And I think we need that strong financial background. And that's where I have been. all along. I think we have great people that's in the curriculum area that, yeah, is there, you know, nobody's 100%, but yeah, I think that when you have directors over that department and a director over this department, all of those are all well and good, but if you don't have the financial foundation, and we know what that looks like when we don't, then we're gonna falter. So I would almost make the motion that we ask Ms. Messina and FSBA reach out to Mr. Barjawan to see if he would be interested in coming back to Manatee County and serve as our interim, whatever you want to call it, superintendent.
Are you making that motion?
I am making that motion that the FSBA reach out to Mr. Barjawan to see if he is interested in coming back to the district and serving as a superintendent.
We have a motion. Sorry, I'm in a different window.
Oh, it's all right.
We have a motion on the floor to have FSBA ask Mr. Bargeron, who was a previous candidate, his willingness to become or
Come
be
back to Manatee County
Come back
and serve as our superintendent.
serve as the superintendent. So we have a motion. Any second to that? I'm gonna second again because of the discussion. We can't have the discussion if it's not an actual motion.
Right.
Okay, and so this is it. There's some valid to all this, and this is why. So there may be people hating me motioning seconds, but this brings up the discussion. We would have had the very good discussion on the last one if we didn't motion, if we didn't second it. I'm not going to hide that I supported Tim from the very beginning. Wanted to be a semifinalist.
Yeah.
Thought that to me, checking off boxes. One of them was not just checked, but X marked, blacked out, everything when it comes to the financial side. So I'm not. I said it from the very beginning that he was a strong candidate for me for those reasons, and you just mentioned those reasons as well. The concern I have with doing it like this and not we've set a process up and we've gone through this process, and now we're potentially throwing this process out without the due diligence of what just happened with the last three. Meet and greet from the public, one-on-ones with us as a school board members. As much as I'd like to sit here and just say, here's who I want as superintendent, that I don't think is prudent for us to do when we just went through this process. If you were to ask me, if you were to have said something along the lines of what Ms. Foreman was kind of getting at, opening it back up for 2 weeks, that is, again, it was going against the process, but I'll leave my thoughts at that, so we can go. We have another speaker, but I'm concerned with the process and what we're showing the public. We said we were going to do this. We've gone through this process, and now we're jumping from outside of the three. But I agree with you 100%. I think he's a very, very strong candidate. I was the one that picked him to go to semis. So, I was with Ms. Foreman. So, Mr. Tatum is lit to speak.
Sure. So number one, the finances are in pretty good shape. And I know you might say, well, that's why we want to keep them. We want to keep them in good shape. And I would agree with you. We want someone that has a strong financial background. But we do have Ms. Sellers. I mean, she is in place, and she does come from the state's auditor's office. And she's going through the budgeting process now for her first time, but she will be through it. And she is an expert on on the rules for spending finance money. So, I mean, we do have her in place. Second of all, I'll reiterate my point that I spent about 15 minutes talking to Mr. Wysong about his budget experience and his financial experience. And while he may not be as experienced as Mr. Bargeron, the whole package that he brings to the table, plus the fact that he's been the deputy there over all of the school system for 2 years, plus the fact that he's been participating in budget processes over the last couple of years, gives me more confidence in his ability to handle the financial situation or financial situations that might show up here in our county. But again, we're in really good shape financially. Our credit rating actually just went up apparently because we're, you know,
Because of the audit committee.
because of the, well, I'm just saying, whatever we're doing in the world of financials, we're doing something right, and our financial rating has recently gone up as far as our credit rating goes. And then finally, I do go back to the point, you know, I've not met Mr. Bargeron, and I've watched him on video a number of times, and he seems like a competent and decent man and very professional and understands his world, but whatever the internal politics may or may not have been here, he left. Okay, maybe he wants to come back. He put in his application, then he pulled it. There's just something about that doesn't sit right with me as a leader of a large organization. And then finally, to me, there are three areas here that you're looking at. You know, for experience, you're looking at finance, operations, and then instruction. And he's really strong in finance, but my understanding is he doesn't have much experience in operations or on the instructional side. And so he may be really good on finance, but the other areas he seems to be pretty weak. And we do have Ms. Sellers in place, and Mr. Wysong comes with a lot of budgeting experience. So we're not going to be able to have this perfect candidate, this 10 in operations, 10 in instruction, and 10 in finance. We're just going to have to find, you know, the person who, if you had those three areas and you could get a 10 and the maximum score was 30, a 25, a 26, a 27, somewhere in that area, I don't support doing that because of the reasons that I mentioned, and I'll resume them. Is number one, we're in pretty good financial shape, so we don't need a fixer to come in, so to speak. Number two, Mr. Wysong, at least I know, does have a lot of budgeting process experience. And then number three, again, I don't know Mr. Bargeron, and I don't want to cast any aspersions on his character in general, but what he's showed me is he's not necessarily loyal to the county, and he went over there, and now he wants to come back, and he put in his application, and he pulled it, and I'm just not sure that's the type of leader that we want in our organization. So thank you.
Thank you. I had Ms. Spray lit up next, and then Ms. Messenger and Ms. Foreman.
Okay. Of the three finalists, Dr. Wysong was not as strong as a leader to me. That's just, I'm not going to go into details, but that's, and the feedback from the survey kind of mirrors that, if you can say. I just think that I'm still with, keep looking. I don't think it needs to be a 30-day span. I think it can be, bring somebody in, like Attorney Dye said, a 1-year contract. And, you know, are we gonna do a 1-year contract for anyone? Actually, it's a 1-year contract for anyone you pick, because they're gonna come here, we may not like their leadership skills at all. So, you know, I don't think, have we ever done a 3-year contract, a 2-year contract? Have we done a 3-year? Okay. So we don't know, and inside politics, you said, there's a culture within the school system overall, not just our district, every district, that you kind of just follow whatever goes along. I'm not for that. Somebody needs to come in and say, this needs to be changed. I've looked at this closely. This really needs to be changed. And we had that. I know I'm going to get some feedback. we've had that. But are we at that next level? I think we've just been coasting along, and again, we don't know what their leadership skills to this level is from the 3 applicants that we have that I think we're pretty much in agreement with. But I also believe we didn't know the fullest potential of what could have been offered by Mr. Bargeron. That's where I'm at with that, and I would hope that the other 2 that wanted to bring him in would consider that. I think it would be a good fit, a perfect fit. There's not going to be a perfect fit. There is not going to be a perfect fit. What I look at is who can I've worked with him. I know his strengths and weaknesses, and I'm sure Ms. Foreman knows his strengths and weaknesses, and just like with the other 3 applicants. I think it would be, I think moving to have the FSBA reach out. We don't know if that's even a option. I think it might be. What I do know is I'm not 100% for the 3 that we have on the table.
Thank you, Ms. Messenger. Is that up next? Ms. Foreman.
I agree with the vast majority of what Mr. Tatum said again, so there's that. We were on a mind meld today. I truly believe if you vote for this, you are bypassing the entire process we went through, and it's insulting to the community, the employees, and the students of Manatee County. If he wanted to be considered, he could have kept his name in. That was his choice to do that. You brought up one of our applicants having that experience of sitting in the budget, but we have 2 people in front of us that have that experience. We have 2 people that have been deputy superintendents. They have risen to that level of responsibility, that have sat in on budget meetings, that have built budgets for whichever departments they oversee. We have 2 candidates that we can talk about that have had that skill set, that understand the budget to a level that our current superintendent, when she walked into the position, understood. So for me, I do not see a benefit to doing this. I really think this is insulting to the community. They took the time to show up at the meet and greet. They took the time to sit in here and watch us have this discussion. They took the time to watch the interviews, and you're going to say, sorry, I want to hire this person that knows nothing about education or operations and only about finance, even though we have a strong financial officer and our financial ratings have gone up to an A+ rating due to the decisions that this board has made and the district has made. So I am not in favor of this. Thank you.
I'm going to agree wholeheartedly with you, Ms. Messenger. When I brought this up, it was to bring up the idea of, do we want to make a decision today? Do we want to postpone it? Do we, what do we, to make that decision? Certainly had no intention of suggesting a name. That would be for a later date. Otherwise, it becomes, as you said, it's an insult. It's a switcheroo. It's like, oh, they had a name all along. And no, I don't think that we should circumvent the process in that way. I was not attempting to circumvent the process. I was attempting to extend it, so, because I do believe in the process. I believe in the transparency. And we've had a lot of public input. We've asked for public input, and when you ask for it, you get it. And so you've got to pay attention to it. So no, I as much as, I respect Mr. Bargeron, I would never ask him to uproot and move back here for a 1 year, even had he continued on with the process, with the application process. I wouldn't ask anyone to uproot for a temporary period like that. So no, I can't support approaching him and asking him to be an.
Thank you. Now that we've heard from everybody about this motion, I'm going to withdraw my second to the motion.
I'll withdraw the motion.
And that's okay.
You gotta make the attempt so you can, because we don't get
Discuss
to
it, sure,
talk.
we've never talked about it.
If we don't talk, and if we don't put names to, to where your mindset is, we don't know.
Yeah,
We can
And-
only talk about this here because of sunshine.
absolutely.
Exactly.
So if you
So,
wanna talk, let's talk.
So I do have someone lit up to speak though, Mr. Tatum. And I don't know if you still want to speak on that.
Well, the motion's been withdrawn.
Motion
so-
been withdrawn.
Yeah, I was just going to make the point that
Okay.
instability in senior leadership, having watched that 30 years in the Air Force, is a really bad thing.
Yeah.
Senior leadership, especially. You can't just have people coming and going every 6 months, every year. It's just really bad. So.
Great. So I'm gonna go ahead and do something kind of crazy here, and let's talk about the candidates. The three ones we have. We've gone through some motions, and I seconded both of them to get the conversation going, to get it moving. So I'm gonna jump in with who we have here. The three we chose to be finalists. I think the three we have. I think to me there's two that I struggle with. And I'll just say the two, Mr. Schneider and Mr. Wagner. I think this position is about managing adults that teach our kids. That is the pretty much top of what we do in this district. Yes, we need the finances correct. We need all those things correct. In order to do it, we need buses on time. Operations part of it. We got to have AC to make sure it's comfortable, that sort of thing. And so I get that there's other aspects, but the number one job of the superintendent is to support the people, the adults who are supporting and teaching the kids. And I think that, and I've wrestled with this because of that. We have to have someone, in my personal opinion, that has been, I don't want to say, has been in the classroom, has been they know what is happening and what is going on. I know zero about car mechanics at all. Don't know how to change my own oil. Sorry. I'm a younger guy. I know nothing, right? I would not want to be the CEO of a car manufacturer or car mechanic place. They would look at me like, you don't know what this is? And I'd say, no, I don't. I don't even know where that is in the car. That would be ludicrous. So I feel like we have to have somebody that when the teachers, the assistant principals, administration in the classroom, that they know that this person knows where I'm coming from, knows what it is like to stand in front of kids, to go through parent meetings and that sort of thing, the expectations of curriculum, etc. The operation stuff, you can learn. What is our bus routes? How did we come up with that? Who do we contract for work, etc. I think you can learn that side. I think the finance side, you can learn. I think all three candidates have enough financial background that they're not coming in here completely blind. But to me, there was one candidate that you would gravitate towards. I think our district would gravitate towards. I think our leaders in the community, the business partners we deal with would gravitate towards his personality, his leadership, and that is Scott Schneider. I think that the concern with Mr. Schneider, and I'm just going to put it out there because he did when he had the interview, is what's going on in Duval County. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. To me, if that wasn't an issue, my first motion after I messed up the pledge would have been to motion Scott Schneider as our next superintendent, because I believe that he has the tools to lead this district, not to where we are now and keep us where we are, but to turn the dial and take us to where we want to be, which to me is the best school district in the state of Florida. And I think he has the capability of doing that. The cloud is, of course, Duval. I have done and talked to as many people as I possibly can. At 9:45 today, got off the phone with the DOE. So I've done as much possible research as I can on that situation. We've seen the org chart that was sent out to us by Mr. Dye. I think that he is still my number one candidate and would be my choice today. I think Mr. Wagner is fantastic. What he's done and what he's done in the district and the loyalty and what he's done not only in Manatee County for career technical, but what he's done across the state is remarkable. Nobody can deny that. And I think that with done these reasons why these are my final two. I think that with Mr. Wagner, there is a known commodity there. We know what we're getting. He's been here. To his weaknesses and his strengths, we know what he's getting. We know what we're getting, from him. I think Ms. Messer brought up a point of surrounding whoever we choose with the right personnel around them to make sure they're successful, and that is true. And I think, again, with Mr. Wagner, the biggest advantage I think he has is he does know what's going on in the district. He is privy to what we've done, the programs we've brought in, and the familiarity with the district, the community, etc., I think can go a long way. And I feel like there is some feelings about a potential going with somebody for 3 years. I think we've all kind of talked about this, and we're wondering, like, oh, well, this contract time, the amount of time. I don't think we necessarily today have to decide on a superintendent and say you're it for the next 5 years, 3 years, etc. I do think we may hurt our chances with some if we only offer 1 or 2 years. Let's be honest with that. But those are my two top two candidates right now. I have been, although I've motioned some of the motions, I've seconded some of the motions here today. I agree with Mr. Tatum. I don't think that the grass is going to be greener in 6 months to a year if we reopen this up. I don't think that that's the reality. And I do agree with him that if you were in this, you put your name in, and you pulled out for whatever reason, and again, I love Mr. Barjon. I'd use one of mine. It doesn't sit well. It didn't sit well when it happened. I even spoke to him after. I just have a feeling if you have a true passion and you want to do this, you got to, at some point, an alpha is an alpha, and you don't care what anybody thinks. And so I do have questions about that as well. So those are my 2 cents of where we're at with these 3 candidates. Ms. Foreman, you were lit to speak first.
Yes. And I will tell you, there's only one candidate that I would rank. I'd like to address some of your points on Mr. Schneider. He wasn't it. And that is Dr. Wysong. I value substance rather than style. And Dr. Wysong is the only candidate with qualifications. He's got a PhD in education. I don't know if you saw his transcript, but his PhD and his master's, he's got 2 masters, but he was 4.0. And the 100-day plan that he presented in the interview was incredibly detailed, well thought out. I wish everybody could see it because he had it down to who he was meeting with, and it was all doable. I think some of the other 100-day plans were pretty vague, and I think Mr. Schneider thinks, wants to get in and see every teacher, but, let's face it, a superintendent cannot do that. Dr. Wysong is a deputy superintendent, which Mr. Schneider is not. He reports to a deputy superintendent. He's only been part of the cabinet in Duval for 2 years. Dr. Wysong, he's part of the cabinet, so like you said, he knows enough about budget. And let's face it, the man is very smart. And so he's going to absorb what he hears in cabinet meetings. He also attends every board briefing. They do it a little differently there, which I think probably gives him pause to wonder if he wants to do this, but that's important. He's a bargaining team member. He sits on the team for bargaining. He led a STEM initiative, and actually, I regret to say that Seminole County is #1 supposedly in STEM, which I have a problem with that, but.
That's why we might bring him here. We want to fix that. So.
Yeah, I believe he's a leader, okay? The only question I have about him is his communication skills. And that, I trust based on looking at their organization chart, he would build a team around him, and he could, you can learn communication skills, but he could also, rely on his team to handle some of that. There's just no comparison to Mr. Schneider in terms of qualifications, and yes, his communication skill is fabulous, but I have concerns about some of the things he said, particularly in terms of getting Manatee High up to an A, in the method. I don't want to see us manipulating the system in order to get grades. I'm concerned about the kids, but he also. Dr. Green, since he's been in administration, Dr. Green's the only administrator, or only superintendent he's been under. And I do know that Dr. Green's style is very authoritarian. And I don't want to see us, in that kind of a leadership style. And so that concerns me. I'm strongly in favor of Dr. Wysong. I'm not going to address Mr. Wagner. He and we've had conversations, and I prefer not to talk about my thinking on that. I did not vote for him to be a finalist, but I will say, I do want to say this, okay? Bradenton Times. This man has more integrity in his little finger than anyone else. I mean, he is a good man, and the trash that was generated in that from that article is just, it was disgusting, okay? Anyway, I want to make that very clear. I would trust Mr. Wagner with my life, and there's not many people other than my husband that I can say that about. He's absolutely a wonderful man. I just don't want to see him as superintendent. So.
Thank you. Mr. Tatum is lit up next.
Okay. So now it's time to go through the thinking process, so here we are. So I like to tell stories and analogies, and so I thought through, like, how could I explain my thinking process on what happened here. So let's say you had to go out and buy a new car, wanted a new car, and you only needed one car. So and you want a nice car, and you can afford a nice car. So you go to the Cadillac dealership and you say, you get in the Cadillac, you're like, man, this is really comfortable and it's nice and it's got lots of bells and whistles. I really like the Cadillac. Then you go over to the BMW and you go to the BMW and you're like, it's nice, sitting here, but you push on that accelerator and that thing just jumps and it goes. You're like, yeah, I like this BMW, it's good. And then you go over maybe to the Mercedes and you say, the Mercedes, this is a solid car, it's solid, you can just tell it's made well, and so now you got to pick one, right? You got to pick one. So if I were looking at cars and I had to come up with 3 categories, you might say performance, which is that acceleration and turning, and then reliability. You can look at consumer reports. That's kind of objective type of stuff. And then the last thing is it comfortable? And that's kind of a personal decision. So I take that analogy that I just gave you, and we have 3 candidates. And then I came up with 3 categories. The first one is qualifications. Basically, did the person meet our minimum qualifications? Do they meet our optional qualifications? The second category was experience, and those 2 first categories are somewhat objective, right? Do they have the qualifications? Do they have the experience? You can see that from their resume. Third category then is that intangible one, that comfort factor. I called it personality, which I included in integrity, humility, charisma, thoughtfulness, maturity. And there's this one characteristic that I came up with at the end of that idea, and I call it humble confidence. So when I looked at all of those categories and kind of scored everybody out, Mr. Wysong came out on top. And I too had some that are a little diminished about Mr. Wysong's communication abilities. His video was what I would call so-so. And I thought, wow, that was so-so. Then his public interview was better. I would have given him a 5 or a 6 on a scale of 10. But in the personal interview that we had, I just felt that humble confidence. He listened well. It was a great conversation that we had back and forth, and he's mature for his age too. So when I went through that process for Mr. Snyder, I believe that he has a good amount of experience, not as much as Mr. Wysong. As Ms. Foreman mentioned, Mr. Snyder is 2 levels down in the organization chart here. He's still the chief of schools over the whole Duval County, and I'm sure he's very experienced, but he does report to a deputy superintendent, whereas Mr. Wysong has been literally the deputy superintendent, not just over operations, but over all of the school system. His previous, he was executive director of instruction of Seminole Schools from 2020 to 2021, so that's good. He's been highly involved in the instruction area, so that's encouraging. If I had to go between good and great, I think Mr. Snyder has good experience and Mr. Wysong has great experience. As far as the personality goes, Mr. Snyder seems like a very good and decent and fine man. And he does probably have a little better communication skills than Mr. Wysong. But and this only comes with age sometimes. It's hard to. I remember one time in the Air Force, I was in an organization where we kind of got a vote on who was going to be our leader. And it's very similar to this situation. We had one gentleman who came in and he was thoughtful and maybe didn't have that vibrant, passionate personality that you really connect with. And then there was another candidate, but had the qualifications and was had that humble confidence that I'm talking about. And the other person came in with that kind of vibrant, really connected well, great communicator. And as it turned out, we picked that vibrant, great communicator, and that person didn't work out well because they lacked. I'm trying to. Mr. Snyder, if you're watching, and maybe he'll watch this later, you're an impressive man, and you have great communication skills, and you have good experience. But I think you need a few more years of seasoning. There we go. That's what a few more years of seasoning potentially before you're ready for this job. Maybe moving up to one more level up in the org chart and having a couple years there might give you the seasoning that you need. And so, and now finally addressing Mr. Wagner, I agree with Mrs. Foreman. Not only do I think he's a good man and an asset to the school system, I believe he's in the right position right now where he is based on the experience that he has. And not only do I think he's a good man, but of the 100 or so people that talked to me and sent comments on Mr. Wagner, 99 of them just say he's one of the better human beings we've ever met in our entire life. But I just believe that based on his experience and qualifications, he's where he needs to be in the school system. And he's told me personally that whoever we pick, he'll be very supportive, which is what I would expect from Mr. Wagner based on his excellent character that he has. And he'll go on doing great things. He's passionate about the area he works in, which is over vocational training, and I think he's in the right position. So for all of the factors that I said, for me, Mr. Weissong comes out on top because of his higher level, I think, of overall experience, and plus that quality of humble confidence that Mr. Snyder is getting to and working on in his life, and I think he'll be there in a few years. I think Mr. Wagner has that too, that humble confidence, but I think he's positioned well. I just think Mr. Weissong is the best total package that we can pick today. Thank you for letting me explain my thoughts.
Thank you, Ms. Frey. You're lit up next.
Yep. Okay. I agree with Ms. Foreman that leadership style can be passed down from one person to another. And hopefully you can create your own leadership style as you go through that in your career, in any profession, to be honest. And that's why I kind of lean away from Mr. Snyder, because of the leadership style that has been passed down. I too talk to people in Tallahassee and got opinions from people whom I trust will give me the most honest opinion they can. But they ultimately say, it's your board's choice. And I value that, and it is our choice. Talking to people in Duval, I'm not gonna labor on this much. That's what leaned me away from Mr. Snyder. You can talk to everyone, but when you talk to people that are directly connected and you have that information, and I was out of town at a leadership training, and people approached me. I didn't seek them out, they approached me and gave me their information. Do you take that with a grain of salt? One person said it, you know, oh, based on my source, credible source was even used, you need to not move forward with him. So I took that, and you have to value their opinions, and I have. And that's why I am, to your point, Mr. Tatum, let whatever's playing out in Duval play out. Is that over? I have indication that it may not be. So that kind of makes me hesitant. And I just will not go that way. Okay, now I'll go to Mr. Wagner. I did have a conversation with Mr. Wagner prior to him applying. I gave him my opinion. I also spoke to people in the community who have worked with him for decades. I talked to a family. One was 4, one was not really there. He does great where he's at. So you get that division even of mindset. I think he's a very noble, honest, high integrity person. I too would trust him with anything. I think he does such a great job where he is, and I know he's got maybe 2 or 3 years left, so I hope, you know, he's going to do well no matter what. Dr. Weissong, he checked all the boxes, but the financial. And we do have strong financial people here. So, and to your point, you had in-depth conversations about his involvement in the budget process for the last 2 years. So perhaps he does bring a little bit of a higher level of academics, but just that little lower bar for finance. The difference in his interview in front of the entire board and then the interview I had with him one-on-one was by far different, way different. I could feel the stress that he was under here. But the one-on-one, he was more relaxed. I think he felt more focused on this is what I want to do, and I did read his 100-year plan versus the others. 100 days, sorry. Oh my gosh.
I won't be here for that.
That is
Yeah.
a long side. Yeah.
Okay, that's my mess up for this time. Last time it was ESE and ELL, so this time it was that. So I do believe he brings a different lens to the district. If everyone forced me to pick, like I said, I don't think any of them had all the boxes that I was looking for. And again, the financial side was one of the biggest. We do have a strong finance team, like I said, but doesn't mean we don't have problems. We still have problems. I mean, we know, we've had meetings about it. So I see where you're coming from and I know you do your due diligence thoroughly. I think we all have. I hope we all have. I just think that, I'm not going to discount him. I will see what the will of the rest of the board is and make my final decision based on that. But I would ask for a 5-minute recess
Right now?
if we can.
Yeah,
I do need
I'm
a-
okay with that, and then I was gonna come back to you, Ms. Messer.
Unless are you click to talk?
I'm not.
Oh, so it's a good time to take a little
That's fine.
recess
We
if we
take a
can.
5-minute recess, absolutely.
Thank you.
Welcome back. We are on air. All right, welcome back. And thank you to Ms. Spray for that reminding of a recess. That was good. That was needed.
Much needed.
Miss Messenger, you were next on speaking.
Yeah. So it really kind of already sounds like there is a consensus up here. So, but I did say I felt like there was good, better, and best. The best to me is Mr. Wagner. And I say that because I want someone that can communicate well, and I know he can. I want someone that will make careful, thoughtful, data-driven decisions, and I know he has and will. I want someone that can gain the respect of those that work under him, and he already has that. I want someone that has the trust of the community. And by and large, I believe he has that as well. As you guys have said, he has integrity. And everybody knows that. You know, when you read the comments from the community members after the meet and greet, you get, you know, short sentences about the other two. You get paragraphs about Mr. Wagner. Now, I know that's because he's local and everyone knows him, and so I get that. But you get whole stories about how he helped in this way or how he served in this way and the difference that he made. And there's such a magnitude there that I feel it's a mistake to ignore that. Because he, I truly believe he will do whatever he believes is right for the school district of Manatee County. And that's what's right for the students. That's what I want. I don't want someone that's going to play a game. And I got the exact same feeling about the same response that you said. I wasn't going to get into that today, but you said it. I agree with you. I don't want someone that's going to play a game. These are my kids. I don't need a game. And to me, there are, in education, there's a couple different schools of thought, right? There's a school of thought of, you know, we've got this state accountability system. I'm going to do and maximize the state accountability system. I'm going to get the points wherever I can get them, so that school's an A. And there's the other mindset of, I'm going to educate the kids the best way I can. And their test scores are going to follow because they're getting educated the best way they can. And I think actually a superintendent has to be both of those. I think you actually have to have a little bit of both. You have to say, well, yeah, there's the system and I got to follow the system, but I'm going to make sure kids are educated the best way they can. I don't want someone that's going to play a game with the system. So I felt the same way that you did about that. And I don't think Mr. Wagner will. I think Mr. Wagner is going to do whatever he believes is best for kids. His kids went to our schools. He's lived here for 20 plus years. And there is so much value in him, not just knowing the school district. He also knows what's happening with our budget. He knows what's happening with our capital planning. He knows what's happening in our instructional side because he has sat in so many meetings. Even if that's not his strongest point, like I said, we're all going to have weaknesses. And it's going to be our job to make sure that they get that support to plug in there to help them. The difference is we know his weaknesses. And I'm not going to say he doesn't have some. He does, but we know them. So for me, he is the best choice. But like I said, there's good, better, and best. I do believe he's the best. But when it comes to better, that better and best got a lot closer for me with my one-on-one interview with Dr. Wysong. He is deeply intelligent. He is a careful decision maker. He has held a deputy superintendent position, albeit not as long as Mr. Wagner. And I do believe that he understands the scope of the job, which is really important. Because when you walk into this job, you don't know what you don't know, but at least he has the ability to know that he doesn't know, which I'm not convinced the good option does. I believe Mr. Wagner has that, though. I will say that. I believe Mr. Wagner knows his weaknesses, knows how to fill it in, knows what supports he needs, and he could hit the ground running, unlike any other choice. Because he knows what's happening and because he knows what's moving forward. Stability is important because we've had a lot of instability, and I think he promises the most stability. That doesn't mean that it's going to be coasting. I wrote something down about coasting. I don't believe this district has coasted. We have improved every year in our state rankings. We're up over 10 rankings from just 5-10 years ago. That's not coasting. This district hasn't coasted. There has been continuous improvement. And I think if you're looking for a promise of solid continuous improvement, I believe that's Mr. Wagner. However, I do see there's a lot of strong support for Mr. Wysong, or Dr. Wysong, I apologize. I think he is also deeply intelligent. You know, when I asked the question in our interviews, public interviews about the achievement gap, I had already done research about the districts and their achievement gaps. And I specifically looked at economically disadvantaged students and ELL students because I thought those were two important subgroups for us to consider. And when you looked at that, Manatee County has improved over the years. In ELL, our achievement gap has decreased, and the proficiency of ELLs has increased. Okay, so the gap is closing. We are doing that in Manatee County. And that is, that's something that I want to consider. But when I looked at Duval's also increased, but not to the same rate that Manatee County did. I'll say it that way for ELLs. Seminole, however, with Dr. Wysong at the helm, their gaps are narrower than ours for economically disadvantaged ELLs and have gained for ELLs 10 percentage points instead of our 5 over the same time period. So while I don't think there was a lot of differences in Manatee, Duval, and Seminole in the economically disadvantaged groups moving up and closing that gap as much, but that was consistent among the three. What was more telling was the movement of ELLs to proficiency and the closing of that gap. And because of that, you know, I that's why I support Mr. Wagner, because we have had that consistent improvement. But I can also see having support for Dr. Wysong. I think, like I said, I believe he's deeply intelligent, and I think he would make careful decisions. The question is, are you willing to wait a year of him learning this organization? Because it's not going to be 90 days or first quarter or whatever. It's going to take a lot longer than that, let's be honest. Are you willing to wait that year of him learning the district to really be able to move this district? Whereas we have somebody that already understands our organization, already knows what we need, and can very easily fill in those gaps because he is aware of them. I have spoken to him. Fill in those areas that he is going to need that additional support so that we can continue to move forward as we've been doing. And that's why I support Mr. Wagner. Not only does he have, I believe, the requisite skills and knowledge and the communication skills that I think he needs, he has a resounding support from employees and the community. When I go visit schools and I say, what are you looking for in a superintendent? I don't say who, I say what. And the answer I get is Mr. Wagner. So there is a lot of support for him. And I think that there's a lot of value in that, because then we'll have that buy-in from day one to move forward. And I really believe he's going to do what he thinks is right for the school district of Manatee County, not what's best so that he can get another job somewhere else or go somewhere else, or it's going to be what he truly believes is right. And so I believe Mr. Wagner is the best choice. If there is a consensus around Dr. Wysong, I would also happily support Dr. Wysong. So thank you.
I want to, before Mr. Tatum, you're lit to speak as well. to some of your comments, I think we're spot on. I think that we know what we get with Mr. Wagner. I think we understand, and so does he, strengths and weaknesses. And I think that it is going to be a year plus to where you truly know the strengths and weaknesses of any of the other two we potentially bring in. And I think you could build around the weaknesses or the lack of knowledge in certain areas that Mr. Wagner has. I think I agree with you on the support. I think the support would be there day one from 90% of the faculty and the staff, etc. I think that if we are sitting here as a board and we are looking at where the district is moving and the things that we've done, I think that if it wasn't my first choice, that Mr. Wagner is the best choice to continue our moving and potentially make it better, because if we look at our numbers, our reading numbers, we just got in our briefings earlier for next meeting. The processes we put in place several years ago are now coming to fruition of everything. We're now seeing the results of those changes we made a couple years ago. We didn't see them last year with the third grade because they didn't make those changes. We made these changes in early learning kindergarten. So now these students are now 2 years later, and we're seeing our scores move up. And I'm talking about 15, 20, 30%. And I just randomly looked at that's ones that come up on top of my head. So the structure that we have and the things we have in place that we're now seeing the results that we did 2 years ago, I think would continue, and we could only potentially get better with that with continuity. I think there's something to your point, Ms. Messenger, that you bring up about the continuity, about the morale, because at the end of the day, when you bring up the interims and that sort of thing with your chart, the instability, the uncertainty, the anxiety, we were humans in the classroom, and there was anxiety and uncertainty and hostility in the district because I was a teacher at the time, and that affects your performance just like it would any other job. And I think that not that the other two, Dr. Weisonger or Mr. Schneider, are going to bring anxiety and fear and all that sort of thing, but there is a level of, we know what we're going to get with Mr. Wagner. And I also want to say this: you don't know who your leader is until they're put in that seat. So some of the things that we may have and we have not seen from Mr. Wagner may have just been because we've had a superintendent who was a good leader, and we haven't seen him in that spot. And we're guessing on all of this, but the one thing, when I say guessing, whoever we pick, we obviously there's stuff we know, stuff we don't know. At the end of the day, if I got to go and pick somebody who knows the district, his kids went here, he's been here 20 plus years, I'll take someone who's gonna do everything he possibly can do, because this is his place, this is his home, to make us better, rather than an unknown person. Again, that was part of the reason why he was my second choice. So if today I kind of see the way things are going, I would 100% support and would say Doug Wagner is my choice. And I think the district would be in a very good spot. I have Mr. Tatum and then Ms. Spray.
Okay. Again, collecting my thoughts. Just give me a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is something to be said for corporate knowledge from Mr. Wagner. Nice that he's here. He understands the system. He's not going to have to take a year to get used to it. But I know in military leadership, they rotate out, and I'm not suggesting we should rotate superintendents every 2 to 3 years, but they rotate people out every so often so that some fresh eyes can come in and look at situations. I'm not, here's the reading at ELA 3, we're at 47%, and the state's at 50, so that's not awesome. I mean, there are some numbers, and we might have made a little improvement compared to the state overall, and there's a smaller gap between us and the state, okay, fine. But the reason they do that in the military is just to bring in some new, fresh eyes. And I do think that we have some situations here with busing as well as with this ELA stuff that we might need someone. It's not that that person would be necessarily better in the sense of as a human being, but comes in with some new ideas and has an unemotional, fresh look at things, and someone who has, not only is you know, Mr. Wagner is the superintendent of operations. He's not over finance and he's not over instruction, whereas in Seminole, truly Dr. Weissong is over all three of those areas. Plus he was the executive director of instruction for Seminole schools. Now, could Mr. Wagner hire a strong deputy superintendent of instruction? Yes, he could, but I like the fact that Dr. Weissong has been over all three of these areas and has been in those 3 areas now for over 2 years. And the fact that he is intelligent and very well educated gives me some hope that he can come in and put some fresh eyes on situations and problems that are going on here, which, you know, even in my own life, that's why sometimes I get outside opinions I get counsel on things that are going on in my life, because I've been looking at this too long. I don't know what to do on this. Like I remember when I was buying a house, I called my mom, who's a real estate agent, like, Mom, can you give me some advice? You know, I'm too involved in this. I've been here for too long. So that is something that I'm looking forward to if we pick Dr. Weissong, that his intelligence and education will be able to come here and provide some fresh ideas into the situation, which is not so it's basically the balancing of that intelligence and experience coming in and producing some fresh ideas versus having that corporate knowledge and not having to take some time to get used to or to know the system. I fall on the side of having some fresh eyes come in at this point, where still we have Mr. Wagner here, who can provide advice and counsel, so to speak, to Dr. Weissong if he comes. So it's not like Mr. Wagner's, I hope not, it's not going anywhere, and he's indicated that he'll be supportive of our new superintendent. Let's see, the other thought about Dr. Weissong is, he was I think it was interesting to hear you all had the same experience with him in your private conversations. He's a very good communicator, and you know, I wish he had Ronald Reagan, you know, communication skills, but who has Ronald Reagan communication skills? You know, the fact that he could build these personal relationships and come off well in individual situations gives me some confidence, and when he meets with members of our community one-on-one, that he'll do a good job of building relationships and supporting the school system. And maybe when he comes here and becomes a little more comfortable with the community and the environment, some of his he didn't do a really bad job in his public interview. It's an area for improvement, just like we all have areas for improvement, just like my handyman skills definitely need improvement, and I keep mentioning that. Probably I should actually do something about that one day, you know, and take some of those classes at Home Depot that they offer or something like that. So just to summarize there, I do think that having some new fresh eyes coming with intelligence and a lot of experience is a good thing for the district at this point. And the fact that he's been a deputy, Dr. Weissong has been a deputy over the finance operations and instruction, as well as an executive director of instruction, as well as a teacher of social studies and history. So he's been involved in the academic process, and he has that humble confidence that I keep going back to, and he was able to build these one-on-one relationships. Again, I reemphasize why he is my #1 choice at this point.
Ms. Spray, you were next.
I'm going to echo what you said. I said at this dais, we need change. A great deal of change, not so much maybe, but we do need fresh eyes in here, a different perspective. I think Mr. Wagner will be a great mentor and provide Dr. Weissong with all of the knowledge he needs. From my one-on-one, he was quoting all kinds of data that I didn't even look at, honestly, and I'm like, wow, he really did his homework on our district, just like we did homework on him and his district. So I would almost, I'm ready to make a motion that we offer Dr. Weisson the position.
We have a motion on the floor to offer the position to Dr. Jason Wysong. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Just for clarity, the motion is to offer the position of superintendent.
Yes,
I just want that to be in the motion.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So we have a second from Ms.
Foreman.
Foreman.
And,
Can you all clear the speakers?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
and to also be clear that this motion would then authorize the chair
We'll move to that, yeah, after.
We'll move
to,
The next we would then move to then
Okay.
offer to, or have the chair and Mr. Dye
okay.
do the, so we're up for discussion on the motion. I'll start, I don't see my lit up, so I'll start off. The fresh eyes completely can see validity in that. Remember, this whole year we haven't had a deputy of curriculum. Last year we had one for 1 year that didn't work out. So the fresh eyes on the curriculum side will naturally happen. Like that's naturally going to happen with whoever we hire, whether it's Dr. Wysong or anybody. You're going to have to hire a superintendent, a deputy superintendent of curriculum. So that to me, that is going to happen regardless of who we go to. So then that goes back to my point of if that checks, we're gonna hire someone to that position, whether it's Dr. Wysong or not. I don't believe that their fresh eyes can't be completed by hiring someone new. I don't think that Dr. Wysong can give us what Mr. Wagner can in this community because he's going to have to learn that. That's going to take time, and I don't think it takes time for Mr. Wagner. We're not looking. To me, this isn't. We've talked about this in a little bit in the search. These average lifespans are like 3.5 years or something. I think we're in a very good spot. There was some talk about interim. I know that's not a real legal word, but there was talk about that. I think that potentially with Mr. Wagner, it's almost you're going to continue the great things we're doing, bring in a fresh eye because of the curriculum, move forward with some new ideas, and he's not necessarily set up to be here for 5 years. So I still think that in my opinion, that Mr. Wagner is the best to continue this district moving forward because we can still bring in the new eyes to give us a better perspective on things. I do agree that's always nice to do, and I think we could still do that. Mr. Tatum, you were lit up, or did you not click off? You were lit up?
I did.
Perfect.
This is a great discussion. A lot of it centers around this idea, do we want the corporate knowledge or do we want someone with some fresh eyes, and which one is more important? And as you were speaking, I thought we could have the trifecta, which would be Dr. Wysong. Doug Wagner is still in his position doing great things for us as he's doing now. And then we get a really strong deputy superintendent of instruction. So we could have the trifecta there. And I talked to Dr. Wysong about, do you know some people out there who you believe would be interested in our deputy of instruction position? And he's been around long enough. He says, yeah, I have some good candidates, I believe, that would really be able to come in and help out with the situations that we're dealing with maybe in ELA. So to me, if we had Dr. Wysong, we still keep I like the idea of mentorship. I think you mentored that, right? It's almost, I see Mr. Wagner as being a mentor in many ways. He has that corporate knowledge, and we get to keep that, but then we also get the intelligence and the experience of Dr. Wysong, and hopefully someone who he trusts will come in as a strong deputy instructor or deputy superintendent of instruction. So to me, that's a trifecta that will make that a threesome like that very good for our district.
Ms. Spry?
I'll echo that. With my one-on-one with the other two out-of-county applicants was, I'm not looking for a 1 or 2 year superintendent. I'm looking for a 5-year, a 6, 7-year superintendent. That was what I asked, and that was a commitment almost from Dr. Wysong. I'm not here for a couple of years. I want roots and a new challenge. And that was what resonated with me, was the new challenge. This is what I can do. I offer this new perspective. And that's why I'm leaning towards, like you said, we could hit a trifecta here. We're not losing Mr. Wagner. Mr. Wagner will be here till he's ready to retire. I believe that that is going to be sooner than the length of the superintendent seat. So he's not going to go anywhere. He's going to still be here. He's going to share that institutional knowledge. And I do believe that Dr. Wysong can bring in somebody that can take our level of curriculum up a few notches. And based on the data from their STEM and their reading and all of that, I think he can do that. And I'm going to support bringing him in for those reasons, and that's where I'm landing.
Thank you. Ms. Messenger?
Yeah, I think you make a really valid argument, and as I've already said, I would be perfectly happy if we picked Dr. Wysong. I really think he's a great choice. So, but I still do believe Mr. Wagner is better for the reasons that our chairman has said. If you're looking for fresh eyes, you can achieve that in a lot of ways rather than making this decision. You can do that by allowing him and whomever else he's going to put on his team, because I've already talked to him about how he'd even pick the next deputy superintendent of instruction. Allowing him to do that, he could pick somebody that could very clearly bring in fresh eyes and make those changes that you feel are necessary and appropriate. So I don't think that is any way a hindrance for picking Mr. Wagner. And what Mr. Wagner brings is buy-in and support from the community and the employees, a deep love and knowledge of Manatee County, that he will truly want to see this school district to succeed because he has so much buy-in here. And that's not replaceable by someone else. You will have to take another year of figuring out who is Dr. Wysong, because, we only get to meet him for a couple hours. And I found him impressive. As I said, I found him deeply intelligent and very thoughtful in what he does, and I will support him without a problem. But he does not offer what Mr. Wagner offers. And so for that, I still do truly believe Mr. Wagner's the best choice, as the chairman has already said, for those reasons. So thank you.
Thanks. I think something else, just kind of as we're talking, I know he's told us, he said he's staying. He very well potentially could, Mr. Wagner, but he very well potentially could not. And he very well potentially could be replaced by a new superintendent who comes in. Why? So we're assuming that Mr. Wysong would not replace him. What if he's got somebody that's really, really great at operations? He's done it himself. He may have somebody. So I don't want to assume anything about anyone staying or going or not. I can only confirm that if Mr. Wagner was the superintendent, he'd be here. That's obviously a guarantee. I think. Ms. Foreman.
Yes, thank you. That's a good point. Yeah, there's no guarantees. Where the idea of fresh eyes, to me, indicates a vision, which is leadership. And I believe that Dr. Wysong would bring that. Where Mr. Wagner, his vision has been in the career and technical side, and STEM, and there's no doubt about it. That's his passion, and he does have a vision in that. But I don't see the vision for the rest of what a superintendent covers. he's, you know, many of the functions he performs are manager, not leader. And, you know, we have worked with him a long time. He's got the he's got the corporate knowledge. But that doesn't mean that he's got the skill set of a superintendent. And my concern with him has been a few decisions that that were just. I told him he's too nice. He doesn't take. He has a hard time saying no, and there have been a couple times where that's been a problem, and you can get in big trouble that way. So, you know, I continue to support Dr. Wysong. I respect Doug. I thank him from the bottom of my heart. And I know I'll be getting hate mail, and I'm sorry about that, but we do have to make a decision for a leader. So, I support Dr. Wysong.
I don't see anybody else lit to speak. So with that, if nobody else has any further discussion items, we can call a vote. So are you ready, Laura? So go ahead and enter.
Clear, the vote is for.
Yep. To be clear, the vote is to offer the superintendent position to Dr. Jason Wysong. And then once we get that approval, then we'll move on for a motion for the contract negotiation. Yep. Is that good? We good? Board? Mm-hmm. Okay. Go ahead and put your votes in. So we have a pass of that motion 4-1 with the chair, Chad Choate, the only no. So now we can call for a motion for negotiation of contract.
Go ahead.
So moved.
I'll second.
We got a motion. We got a second that the school board offer the position to Dr. Jason Wysong to authorize contract negotiations to begin, led by Chair Chad Choate and Legal Counsel Stephen Dye. Motion by Mr. Tatum, second by Ms. Spray. Any discussion on this particular item, negotiation, that you all would like me to bring forward?
You mean in the negotiations?
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that, is there a preference on we're negotiating time, salary, that sort of thing? Yeah, absolutely. So Ms. Foreman, I don't see a speaker, but Ms. Foreman?
Okay.
I saw your hand first.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, you know, I've said from the beginning that any superintendent contract, that we have to provide the fail-safe that if a board changes, that, you know, I liked Mr. Dye's suggestion of that a new board has to work with the new superintendent for at least 6 months before they can terminate him without cause.
Right.
And so I think that's a good way to do that. Now, whether the rest of the board would rather have no termination without cause in the contract, in other words, you have to have cause to terminate it, I'm open to that discussion as well. But I think that is a critical piece of any contract.
All right, thank you. Is that it? Was that it? I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Spray, you were next on the board.
I kind of echo Ms. Foreman here. I keep saying that today for some reason.
That's good. That's good. Keep it up.
Being a part of that contract process, I think we all should know what that is going to be before it's I know we're gonna have similar things of what you would normally have in a contract for a superintendent. But,
Well, we'll bring it back to the board.
right, it will be brought back, I just wanna make that clarity, that that contract will be brought back to the board. And we'll all know the details of that contract, collectively. Because I might have something like Ms. Foreman had, or Mr. Tatum, or even Ms. Messenger, might have to add into that. I've reviewed the contract from, our superintendent now, and there's things like, oh, that's a little questionable, but I think that we all should have that
Do
final
you have any
say-so.
specifics? You echoed what Ms. Foreman said about the clause
Yeah,
of removal.
right.
Anything else?
I mean, if something really bad came out, there would have to be reason, yeah,
that's
but,
what
but,
caused.
yeah, that's what caused, so, yeah. But I don't think we're gonna have, I don't feel that we're gonna have anything that we can't deal with. I think it's all gonna be all well and good. And I wanna just say, good luck with that,
Do we-
helping us through that. That's all right, you're okay. And to say, we'll see how it goes from here.
Mr. Tatum was next.
I understand the concern about the 6-month clause, but I'm not a fan of that. I mean, if the board wants to make a decision for whatever reason to remove a superintendent, it's our decision to make. I don't think that our hands should be tied. I would be in favor of putting in, I talked about this before, some type of, if it's not for cause, a 4-month severance package or something like that to say, look, it's a marriage, it's not working out. We want you to be able to transition. Here's a 4-month severance package. I would be in favor of something like that, but I don't want to tie our hands. It's at-will employment, as we call it, as a legal term, right, Mr. Dye? And and there may be things where we think it's for cause, but he doesn't think it's for cause, and then we get into this legal battle. Is it for cause? Is it not for cause? And I don't want to tie our hands. If for whatever reason there'll be another election in 2024, the contract will probably be at least 3 years or so. If 2 more board members come up here and they should have the opportunity to make a case for whatever reason that they are not happy with the superintendent, and then a new board should have an opportunity to vote on that. I just don't think our hands should be tied by some 6-month, handcuff, so to speak. So, thanks.
Ms. Messenger, you were lit?
Yeah, so, a few things. One, the concept of terminating without cause, like, I think that should be in the contract. I'm not in favor of removing that. But I think it's interesting, the concept of a waiting period after the election, or doing what he said, which is a severance package, because, that might make the board be more willing to work with the superintendent. I think the intention of that is that there are concerns that there are folks that run on, well, this superintendent's terrible, and it's easy to run on, oh, how bad the district is and when, right? That's an easy thing to run on. It's a lot harder of a thing to run on, well, look how far we've come, but yeah, we can do better, right? That's a harder argument to make when you're running for office. So there are a lot of people that do that and then come in and just fire the person without really getting to know the superintendent, getting to know the qualities of the superintendent, and thinking they're going to get something better, and then they don't. And I think we've seen that a lot this election cycle. Then here it comes, right? So I understand your point, and I think it's a valid one. I think 6 months is kind of hefty. I think if we were going to do it, I'd rather do like 90 days or something else. I think that's more reasonable. I think after a few months, if the superintendent really isn't working well with the board, then that gives enough time for the superintendent and the board to determine that. But I'm also would be fine with the severance package instead of a several months package. I think that's also a reasonable approach. I'm actually fine with both approaches when it comes to that. I know that when we had first talked about this, there had been conversations about performance review and how we want to do that type of contract. I'm going to trust that you're going to make that the most relevant and updated concept of what that should look like. I will look forward to seeing what that is, because I know that Mr. Dye And Dr. Vogel had kind of given opinions about that in the contracts. You know, our current contract with our superintendent does have a performance piece. And that was something that I did push for when we did it. And it was mainly because teachers are graded by that. And I felt like our superintendent should be too. But if there is logical reasoning that that should not be in there, I can support that as well. And I look forward to seeing what is negotiated out of that. I support it being in there. I support it not being in there, as determined by the team and you. I will support that, and I have full faith that you'll make the appropriate decision when it comes to that, because I see that you are nothing but logical and reasonable in those types of things. So I have faith that you'll determine what that will be. The only other thing that I was trying to find it in her contract. When we made this current contract, we built it so that when the superintendent was going to leave, it gave the board a significant amount of time to find somebody new.
Right.
Of a notice of leaving.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I think we set something, and I can't find it at the moment, but we set a date in there, like, it was like the December before the end of the contract. The superintendent,
It was December.
I think so, the superintendent had to notify the board
Okay.
their intention of whether they want it to be renewed and all those types of things, and I would like to keep that in there. I think that that's very beneficial to this board. If the superintendent were to choose to leave, that gives us plenty of time to go through this search process again. And in terms of length, I know that, you know, it's not, he's gonna pick up his whole family and move here. That's a big ask, so I don't think you're gonna be able to have him come here without at least 3 years. And I would support that. I don't think you're gonna, I wouldn't pick up my family and make that large change for my family without something significant, a significant amount of time and commitment from this board. So I think those are all of my notes about the contract. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tatum, you were lit up next.
I have a question about the legality of what you were talking about, Ms. Messenger. Can we require an employee to give us 6 months' notice? I mean, it's an at-will employment. I mean, if 3 months before the contract ends, Dr. Wysong would say, "I thank you. It was a great time being superintendent in Manatee County, but I don't want to be the superintendent anymore." What do we have any recourse? I mean, can we require him to give us 6 months' notice of leaving, or is that even is it
It's
legal?
just the contract length, though. It's like just, it's not like any time. It was when the contract were set to expire,
Right.
the time before that.
They could leave, she could still announce whenever she wanted.
But that's what I'm asking. Let's say we offer it to him on 1 June and of 23, and in April of 26, he says, "You know, I've decided I don't want to be the superintendent anymore," and it's only 60 days before the end of the contract. He hasn't met that 6-month requirement, but I don't know that we can legally tell him, you have to stay for another 4 months. I mean, it's an at-will situation, right? But you're the lawyer, so.
Yeah, so the extended notice is legal. And if someone was not to comply, that'd be a default, so that would probably jeopardize their severance package or whatever, so.
Great. Yeah, that's nice to have then.
Yeah.
Give us an adequate amount of time to find somebody else, but let's hope that's not the case. The other point I wanted to bring up is a couple of people have mentioned maybe requiring the person to own property in the county, which I thought through that, and I'm not a fan of that, but I would like to see them be a resident of the county within a reasonable amount of time, 6 months or something like that. That gives them time. And I don't know what his financial situation is. I don't want to force a mortgage on him or something, you know, but at least he needs to be a resident of Manatee County. That's where his driver's license is. That's where he votes. I guess that's what would establish residency in the county. Whether he rents or owns, it's up to his financial choice. It's none of my business, but I would like him to be a resident of the county within 6 months or whatever seems like a reasonable amount of time.
Okay. Was that it?
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Mrs. Foreman.
Yeah, I just want to respond to the idea of a severance package in lieu of, instead of period of time after an election. That's precisely what happened after this last election. Boards were terminating their superintendents and paying these big severance packages. So I don't see having to spend the district money as being an impediment to a new board to make that change. Whereas if they have to wait, you know, maybe 6 months is too long, but if they have to try to work with that superintendent for 90 days, you know, or 6 months, then there may be a reconciliation, you know, and you know, so I don't like the idea of severance package. It's only going to cost the district money for political purposes. So.
I will say I agree. I don't think that I'll do what's privy. Obviously, it seems like we have a consensus, a majority consensus about having that clause of removal for 60 days, 90 days, whatever that may be, and that's something we can bring up. I particularly don't want to impose that on a future board that, you know, that would do that. I think in the severance package as well, I don't think we need to have that in. Do we have one right now in the current contract? I forget. An actual severance. I don't know if we do, but that typically goes on to another negotiation as you're trying to make separation, is when that severance comes up.
Yeah.
I don't think we have one now. I'm not entirely sure.
She would get all
But-
accumulated vacation time, accumulated sick leave. I mean, normally
That's-
that's normally a negotiated thing. Like when Dr. Green decided to leave,
Right.
like that the board negotiated with
Right.
her a package.
Right.
So
Or yeah, exactly.
that is something that's typically negotiated
Right.
at the time.
But even though I'm not in favor, I'll do whatever the board wishes. I think we've got 3 that want that clause in there. Hold on, I'll get right back to you. But I do agree with all the other stuff. Yes, Ms. Spray.
Severance packages, if someone decides to leave because something came up and you have to use a case, Duval. That's the only example I can give right now. And actually, other districts done the same thing. They weren't happy with their superintendent, the board voted them out. They left their merry way with this huge severance package. It was almost like a reward for bad behavior, and I am not in favor of that. To your point on leaving, how long did it take us to go through this process to get here today? Months. A lot of work, not to even say the dollars we spent for FSBA to do this in a very well orchestrated manner. The cost to bring the candidates down, applicants down. It's a huge process. So I believe that if someone wanted to leave, we would have to know well in advance, this isn't going to be a good fit. I was offered another position somewhere else for more money. I hope we don't get into that. I didn't feel that we would get that kind of mentality with Dr. Wysong. It was a commitment that I feel he was going to make. And I believe that he would say, I'm ready to move on, and give us that opportunity to do another search or whatever we needed to do to get to this point again. Hopefully we don't have to do that. This kind of process is not cheap. It cost our taxpayers a lot of money to get here. And we're grateful that we have that. I'm grateful we have the support of the community. So I would say that, you know, if you're going to give notice to leave, it needs to be a period of time that gives us the right amount of time to put that thought process back in and how we're going to do it again.
Okay.
So that's what I would say to that.
Mr. Tatum, you were lit up again, or no?
Yes, please. I'm not quite sure about the consensus on the the minimum time with the new superintendent issue. You and I are not in favor of it. It appears that Ms. Foreman's not in favor of it.
Oh, I thought you were.
Or she is in favor of it.
I'm in
It
favor.
appears that Ms. Messenger is in favor of something like that.
But not 6 months. And then I thought Cindy said, so I
Well, didn't
was
know.
just saying,
I wasn't clear on Ms. Spray's opinion on that. Are you in favor of having a minimum time where a new board has to work with the superintendent before they could remove him or her? Are you in favor of that, or?
I'm kind of on the fence with that. I mean, if they're really bad, I don't want to be locked into a minimum time.
This is only after an election, not right now.
Oh,
yeah,
all right,
yeah,
right,
not
right.
right now. Yeah, this
Okay.
would've been like a new
Okay,
board
clarify
change
that then.
over.
So
It's just after
in
an
the
election.
24 cycle, you're saying the board should have the flexibility to address the superintendent and/or renew a contract. Is that what you're saying?
I think the point was that after an election cycle, that the whomever were to be sitting here after the election cycle, that those individuals that are on the board would need to work with the current superintendent for whatever requisite amount of time would be negotiated in the contract. This has no other effects to
For us now.
of us now hiring this person. It has no other effects of any other circumstance, because all of that's already written in the contract and will be negotiated. I would imagine very similar terms. This would only be after an election cycle, if new board members were to be elected, perhaps running on, I'm gonna fire the superintendent, because that happens, that those board members would need to work with the current superintendent for a certain amount of time.
I see what you're saying. So I'm kind of like,
Well, I'll make, just so we can get it on the record, I'll make a motion that we not have that kind of restriction in the contract negotiations.
Okay. I'll second. So now we gotta vote. So instead of consensus, we
vote.
gotta vote. Discussion.
Yeah, no,
I'll just throw it out the board.
we are asking an individual to uproot his family, move over here. We're offering a 3-year contract, but we have this election coming up, and it could be a different board in November of 2024. And it could be, you're out, and I think some of the decisions other boards have made in regards to terminating superintendents right after an election was hasty, and had they possibly had time to work with and cooperate with the superintendent, it could have had a different result, which would be far better you want to talk about stability, that would be far better for a district if you've got a stable relationship between the board and the superintendent. And it's expensive, like Ms. Bray said, to go look for a new superintendent. But if you've got to pay a severance package, new board members may not value the dollars spent as much as others. So I'm strong on this one. I think it's I think we owe it to Dr. Weissel.
Ms. Messenger, you had for discussion?
Yes. I don't support that motion just because I think it's a mistake to hamstring you as the negotiator. I think that I have no desire to do that. I don't know what kind of circumstances you're going to enter into, and I would rather give you the leverage that you might need in order to negotiate other portions of that contract, because you don't know what's going to arise. So I really have no desire to hamstring you. Like I said, I think that her position is logical. I think his is as well. I trust that you will make the right decision when it comes to that. And so I don't think that this is the right way to do it. I think this will be hamstringing you and our attorney and FSBA and whomever else is going to be part of those negotiations. And I don't think that's the right move. I think you might need this in order to achieve other things in the contract. And I don't, I'm not sure what those could be, but I could see that it could happen. So I don't support this.
Yeah. Mr. Trainer?
So I like the word hamstring, but I'm concerned about us being hamstring. We are the authority and we should not be hamstrung. If for whatever reason things are not working out with the superintendent, we should not be hamstrung. And the second point there is that Mrs. Foreman's reasoning appears to be something to the effect of, well, if the voters, quote unquote, make the wrong decision and pick people who are wild and crazy and come in with an agenda and fire the superintendent, that we then are the bulwark to stop that. And what we're essentially saying is, you, the voters, made the wrong decision. You picked wrong people, and so we're going to put this in our contract to keep you, the voters, from picking the wrong people sitting up here and firing a superintendent. And that's not our role as board members, as I see it. If the public chooses people that run on a platform of firing a superintendent, and that those voters put those people in office, then those new board members can come up here and make their case, and we will vote on it as board members, elected officials. But to basically tell the voters, well, we're going to put something in our contract to make sure that you wild and crazy voters out there don't pick wild and crazy candidates and get up here and fire a superintendent, I think that's a wrong message to send to the public. It's assuming that the voters will make a bad choice, and there's no bad choice necessarily. Voters choose who they choose, and then those people should be able to come up here and make the voices of their constituents heard.
Thank you. Ms. Spray, you're lit up.
I agree. I don't think that we should have something like that in our contract, that if a new board comes on, they're forced to work with that superintendent for a period of time. We all came in with our own thoughts of what we needed to look at and what we wanted to change. Potential new board members may come in with that mindset too. I don't necessarily look at somebody, and I know they have campaigned on, I'll get rid of the superintendent, and they had consensus on the board when they got here and did it. I didn't necessarily think that was right, but they may have known information that the public didn't know. So I would leave it up to the board to make that choice, not to put that in a contract. I just don't think that, I don't think that having that provision in there would be a good business decision, in my opinion.
You had something, I think.
Yeah, this is a good discussion and helpful to Mr. Choate and I in negotiating a contract. Contracts, two-sided discussion. So I don't think you need to take firm positions right at this moment, because you're going to approve the totality of the contract at some point. You'll have the ability to question any aspect of it. But a great and helpful discussion that you're having right now gives Mr. Choate and I some direction of where to start. But you'll have the opportunity to approve the entire contract after we've been discussing it with Dr. Weissong.
Okay.
So do you think we should not have the motion like this in Ms. Messenger's point, because it would take away something potentially?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Ms. Messenger on that. I mean, we're hearing what you're saying.
Yeah.
And we're getting a sense of what you'll agree to ultimately. But I don't think, for negotiation strategy, I don't think we should be making decisions on certain contract provisions right at this moment.
Okay.
But hearing your thoughts on these things has been very helpful, and I've been taking a lot of notes. Yeah.
Well, when we're having this discussion now, I can tell you if it comes back with this provision in the contract, I'll make a motion again and bring it up again. And this is not the way that public officials should do business. You do not have a provision that says people get elected, they have authority, and then you tie their hands because we think the voters will make a bad decision. That's essentially the message that's being sent here. And so we just might as well make it known right now. That's why I made the motion that we'll vote on it and we'll decide. But it'll just come up again if it comes in, and that should not be part of the contract negotiations. It's higher than the contract between us and the new superintendent. It is a governing principle that we should not be tying the hands of our elected officials and telling the voters, well, we're going to make sure you voters don't make a bad decision, and if you do, we put a provision in here to stop you from getting your way. That's a bad way of doing governance,
Yeah.
and I'm not in favor of it. And I'm not in favor of it now, and I won't be in favor of it if it shows up in the contract. It should not be part of contract negotiations.
Can I respond to that really quickly?
Yes.
I don't get the impression that Mrs. Foreman's point was anything about the voters. I don't think that was her point at all. I think her point was more that, and forgive me if I misspeak for you, but I believe your point was that you just don't want the superintendent to become a political pawn in somebody's race. That's the point. It shouldn't be about that. There's a lot of things to discuss when you're running a race, but this one single person should not be your political pawn that you run on. I think that was more your point. Not that you believe the voters are right or wrong in whomever they vote for, but just that shouldn't be something that you run on. That there are a lot of things that you can run on, and that person deserves more than to be someone's political pawn in a race. That's just the impression I got from what you were saying.
Well,
and-
and I do think that have been boards newly seated that did not necessarily run on, hey, we're going to get rid of the superintendent, but that's exactly what happened. And there was a public outcry, even their constituents, so it's not like I'm pinning this on the voters. It is, it's trying to maneuver in this difficult political environment. And we are blessed to have people that are willing to be our superintendent, let me just say that, so.
I'll just comment that I don't think that if we have this provision or not, it's going to change how someone wants to run. I mean, if they want to run and say we're all need to go and superintendent from down to every teacher, I mean, they can say whatever they want. I don't think this provision's going to say, oh, well, that's out. I can't run on that anymore. I think they're going to run on whatever they want to run on. Again, I just don't think we should be hamstringing or handcuffing future boards to make decisions that's right for that time. I'm not disagreeing with, there's been some decisions that I think were questionable by boards. I'm not disagreeing with that at all. I just, that's their purview though. They were elected to do that. And they'll be, in 3 years, they're going to be judged on that at the ballot, right? And so that's where it should be. I don't think we should be able to dictating 2 or 3 years from now, whatever, what that board can and can't do. Ms. Chatham, you were lit up again?
Whether we directly tell the voters that we think they'll make a bad decision, or whether, but if that provision is in there, it's indirectly telling the voters, you might make a bad decision. So that's my only point is, I agree with you, I'm kind of done with my comments.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I think all in all, we're just trying to make sure that when you get elected or when someone gets up here, you give yourself some time to learn some people. Sometimes what you hear on the outside, stuff like that, isn't always right. And so I agree. You got to come in and learn. Do we want to? So we got a motion. We got a second. We'll go ahead and vote.
To be clear, the motion is,
To be clear, the motion is to not. Oh, I don't want to.
You want me to repeat?
I don't want to
Please.
put anything in your mouth. So I want to. Did you have it, Ms. Cox? Okay.
Totally right.
The motion is to not have protection period in the contract where the superintendent cannot be fired for a period after the election.
I think we should read that into a microphone so that the public could hear it and it's on public record.
Did you type it in or no?
I did, but it came up with that for whatever reason.
Okay.
Or you want to read it, Mr. Chairman, or?
Yeah, I can if
Did Mr. Dyer?
Ms. Cox, you want
read it
to
out?
hand that over to me and I'll read it into the.
Or
Did
Mr.
Mr.
Dyer,
Dyer read it out? He,
or
Whoever.
me, who made the motion, whoever.
Glad I wrote it down.
I'm lost at who made the motion in a second. Oh, Richard.
Okay, so the motion was to not have a protection period in the contract where the superintendent cannot be fired for a time period after an election.
Okay, so we've got that motion. We've got that second. Were you able to put it on Granicus or no? We don't have to. Oh, you did? Okay.
Oh, it's there. No, it's-
All right, so go ahead and cast your votes for that.
That we not put it in, correct?
that we're not putting it in,
Right, okay.
that we're not having one of those. That passes 3-2 with the 2 noes being Ms. Messenger and Ms. Foreman. Okay, so we've gone through some of the contract stuff. I'll make sure, obviously, we're going to come back to y'all. So anything else with the contract that we're looking for? Okay, so we had a motion, we had a second on the negotiation. So the school board offered the position of Superintendent Dr. Jason Wysong and authorized contract negotiations to begin, led by Chair Chad Choate and Legal Counsel Stephen Dye. We had a motion on the floor for that, correct? I forget who motioned, though, that original.
I did.
You did?
I made an original.
Yep, the original motion. The second motion?
The second was Ms. Foreman to, oh, no, I'm wrong, sorry. Who did?
During that discussion, we had the motion from Mr. Tatum, which we just did. So we got to go back to our original motion, which was allowing us to do the contract. So did we write down who motioned? I did not. Did you say you did, Ms. Messina?
Are you talking about the original motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Negotiated contract being led by Mr. Choate and Mr. Dye.
Yes, ma'am.
That's the motion that I, according to my record, is not yet voted on.
No, but did you know who motioned it and seconded it?
No.
Okay.
I have Spray and Foreman for the motion on Wysong, but I did not put in, I apologize.
All right, well, I'll
That's
make
okay.
a motion that we direct the chair to negotiate a contract with legal, Mr. Dye, to begin immediately.
Okay. So we got a motion. We have a second.
I'll second.
Okay, so we've got a second. Any more discussion on that? Obviously, that's what we were just doing. We were going around before that other vote, so no other discussion on that. Let's go ahead and, were you able to get that up there, Ms. Cox, or no? All right, so let's just go with all those in favor. We'll raise hands. Mr. Tatum, obviously, aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
So that passes 5-0. And with that, let me go back and say, has there been contact with with Dr. Wysong, and has he accepted the?
Was waiting, normally the chairman will give him a call.
Okay.
So
We're not in a position to offer anything.
Okay. So let's do a quick recess, and we'll give him a call, and then we'll come back and close everything up with the next processes. All right, welcome back. And good news, our candidate, Dr. Jason Wysong, has accepted and is willing to go into negotiations for the contract for the superintendent at Manatee County Schools. So he wanted me to thank FSBA for their professionalism. He said you guys were absolutely fantastic through the whole process, and wanted me to extend thank you there. Of course, to the board, extend thank you. He's excited to get going, and I told him that Mr. Dye and I would be in touch to negotiate the contract, and he's really excited to get to Manatee County and get to work. So thank you, Dr. Wysong, for that. We want to move forward to talk about the contract negotiations. Is there a, let me ask FSBA in the past, I mean, what, is this tomorrow? Is this next week? Is this, what are your thoughts, and how has this happened before?
Normally what would happen is, the starting point would be the existing superintendent's contract to look at. I would look at it based on all of your thoughts, and then conversations would probably start between Mr. Dye and Mr. Wysong, Dr. Wysong, and then we usually have a very short period of time in which everybody comes together and resolves it.
Okay.
And then also transition time, normally we would have Dr. Wysong and Mrs. Saunders work together
Correct.
on transition, because Dr. Wysong is going to be a major loss to Seminoles, and he's got a lot of irons in fire there, so he's going to have.
And they need time to figure something out too. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we will do it as quickly as possible. We'll start ASAP.
We're available to help anyone we can.
Okay. And I know we already talked about having that June, we've discussed in our timeline to have that June time to where Dr. Wysong comes over and is with the superintendent. So we'll get to work right away, Mr. Dye and I. With that, before we adjourn, we could do some quick board comments. Ms. Messenger, we'll just go around if you have any extra comments.
I don't know if I have much to say other than I'm looking forward to our new superintendent, and I thank the board for this process. It was really clear that everybody was extremely deliberative and thoughtful, and I just really appreciate that. So thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Ms. Bray?
I also want to say thanks to the board for a smooth process. When we started this whole thing, I was a little tense about it, but as we moved along, a calmness came over me on what my vision for this district is. And it was always has been change. If you don't bring in new ideas, you're not going to get new improvements. So I'm excited that Dr. Wysong has accepted, and I feel bad for Seminole because we're taking one of their stars. But I think he's going to shine here in Manatee. I want the whole district to welcome him and him and his family. So thank you again, FSBA, for everything you did. Thanks to the board for all the deliberation that we just went through, and even through the whole selection process. I think it was very smooth, orderly, and we respected everybody's opinions. So that's all I have to say, and I'm excited to transition into a new direction with our district.
Thanks. Ms. Foreman?
Fair is fair. Seminole, you took one of our stars. We're taking one of yours. Not that we play dirty, but, So, but no, I think I'm really excited about Dr. Wysong coming. I think he is going to bring some insight that will be very helpful in the future to this district. I think he's going to be a quick learner. Mm-hmm. I don't think we're going to have to wait a year for him to know the district. I'm sure he's just going to jump right in. And we welcome Dr. Wysong, his wife, and his son to Manatee County. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shana?
Yeah, good discussion on the board. Thank you to the community again for all their participation. Thank you to FSBA. A word from Mr. Schneider. He has been a finalist in a couple of competitions. And what that tells me is he's a great candidate, and I think he will be a good superintendent potentially someday based on what I saw. So I would just like to offer him a word of encouragement to keep moving forward, keep getting that experience, keep getting that seasoning. You're an impressive man, and you do have good credentials. I'm sure it'll happen for you one day. And I just want to offer him a word of encouragement. I'd like to, don't be discouraged, but I'm sure he is, you know. That's not realistic. But take that discouragement, but channel that energy towards improving your seasoning and your experience, because you obviously, people like you and they like what they see, and I think one day it'll happen for him. I just wanted to offer him that word of encouragement, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you again, FSBA. Thank you to staff. It was really a flawless process. Thank you to the board, and we'll be in touch with contract negotiations as soon as they get going. And with that, we are adjourned.